Hey, everybody out there. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Tom Corliss. In just a couple minutes, we're going to be doing, I believe it's just our second ever of these Back to the Future Live, which is our very popular history segment from the WDW News Today podcast, where we do them live and in video form. I know we usually are not on Mondays live. This is something a little different. Usually we're on Wednesdays. Nick over here, host, who's eating salsa over there in the corner. We usually do WDW News Tonight on Wednesdays. We're off this week. There's Nick eating salsa in the background with the American flag. Very patriotic here. So tonight we're doing something a little different because this week is the 50th anniversary of Pirates of the Caribbean. We're kicking off our Pirates of the Caribbean week with this incredible history segment. For those unaware, Back to the Future, again, is a segment we've done in audio form on the WDW News Today podcast for almost 10 years now. And it is typically an exhaustive historical look at the attractions from the Disney parks. Tonight is no different. This is the script. It's 25 pages long. So we have a lot to discuss this evening. It should be a lot of fun, but we're going to give people a couple minutes to come in. Just because we say we're starting at 9 o'clock, we're going to give people a couple minutes to catch on Facebook and Twitter that this is happening. But a couple reminders about the week ahead. It is Pirates Week. We've got some really cool articles coming up on the site. In fact, one of our writers showed me today he was working on 50 facts about Pirates of the Caribbean. That should be a fun article. We've also got Jason and I are going to be out at Disneyland this week. And now today Disney announced that they're doing stuff for the 50th of Pirates of the Caribbean, which is exciting. So we'll be there to cover everything. We got our Blue Bayou and our Cafe Orleans reservations. We're going to go try those limited time Pirates 50th items. And we'll go do all the counter service ones as well. We'll give you guys reviews. We're going to be live streaming a bunch. We'll do some Periscope, some Facebook Live. We did our first Facebook Live stream this weekend of Misadventure Falls when that opened at Typhoon Lagoon. Great response on Facebook, so I think we're gonna be doing that a little bit more going forward. While we're waiting for people to come in, there are a couple other people joining me. I don't know if they want to talk yet, but Justin Heyman is here. Justin, you're live.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, I'm live, but I can't talk, so
let me put you on camera. Well, that's a nice.
Are you enjoying my mini mug? I did that
There's
just
a
for you,
Minnie
Tom.
Mouse mug.
I have every mug.
That's amazing. So why the Minnie Mouse one then? You're like, hey, I'm going to be on camera.
It was clean.
Thousands of people are going to see this. I'm going to get a Minnie Mouse mug.
Well, you've seen that castle mug. You've seen the retro mugs. I figured I'd break, and it was clean. I mean,
well, I usually assume everyone is like me and has 8,000 different mugs.
So I haven't been on in a while. So.
You have not. It's good to have you this evening, one of the originators of the segment. We got Ron Deanna with us. Hey, hello, Ron.
Hey, everybody.
We got Ashley Jasmer. Ron's drinking wine.
Hello. Hello.
Who else we got? There's someone else. I'm missing somebody. They're not on here anymore. Okay, hopefully they come back.
Hey.
There's Jason. Jason needed time to get ready. I was trying to give Jason time. Jason is in the control booth. Jason has done a tremendous amount of work getting ready with, because we're doing this in video format. We're going to have images and videos, and it is a little more complicated than this segment has ever been. So our thanks to Jason for helping out with that side of things. There's Eric Lancy. I was looking for Eric.
Hi, everybody. And if we're giving mugs here, I've got mine. So
there you go. World Showcase Paris mug. So again, we're gonna get started in about 5 or 6 minutes. But again, it is Pirates Week. We got some great articles coming up on the site. We're gonna be live again at Disneyland starting Wednesday. We'll be covering all the Pirates festivities. We're gonna cover other stuff as well. It's California Food and Wine Festival, the return of the Electrical Parade, the return of Remember Dreams Come True. We're gonna review the World of Color dessert party. We're doing the Frozen live at the Hyperion dining package. A lot of good stuff to review. And we'll get plenty of pictures of Paper Bag, the ride. For everyone, I know everybody loves that. Make sure we get you lots of high-quality pictures of that paper bag over what was the Tower of Terror. Oh, I got my cup. I guess we're showing off cups. Pirate cup.
So, Tom, was Sunday your first day ever at a water park?
No, second. I did
Second.
Typhoon in like September last year. And fun fact, you see it there. I think you still see a little bit. I busted my lip open on the back of Nicholas Cicero's head. We
No
go on.
comment.
I've been on Crush and Gusher before. Usually alone. I went on it several times alone last time I went. So I was not prepared when I sat in the back of the raft for the velocity at which we were going to hit the water at the end of the ride. And so I was propelled several feet forward, face first into the back of Nick's head, and got this nice little mark on my lip.
It's a hard head.
Yeah. So that happened. But anyway, it's not bad today. And my lip didn't blow up. I thought it was going to blow up. It's just a little bruise. I was like, oh, great. I'm going to go to Disneyland with a fat lip. But anyway, those of you just joining us, we're going to get started in about 4 minutes. We're just giving people time to tune in. It's going to be Back to the Future Live, Pirates of the Caribbean 50th anniversary celebration. We haven't done a Back to the Future in a while. I think, in fact, we haven't done one since the Disney Mountain one. Yeah, the Disney Mountain Back to the Future, which was, of course, we had to reach the goal in order to do it, and we did it. It's available on YouTube now. You should watch it. It's really wonderful. A great look at a project that there was no documentation of, and that never was built. So really fantastic segment. And we haven't done one since, so it's been a little while. We do have a couple coming up. I know next month we're going to do El Rio del Tiempo and the Grand Fiesta Tour. We're celebrating 10 years. Celebrating 10 years of the Grand Fiesta Tour.
Wow, really?
That next month. And then in May, who said really? Someone said really?
Yeah. I can't believe it's been 10 years of that thing.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to do Laugh Floor. It was either that or Monsters, Inc. Laugh Floor 10th anniversary. I decided people like Grand Fiesta Tour, so we're going to do that one. And then in May, we're going to do Magic Kingdom Fireworks because Wishes is going away. I think it'd be a nice way to send off Wishes with a in-depth history of the fireworks spectaculars at the Magic Kingdom. So I'm going to send out one more tweet before we get this thing rolling. But thank you all for joining us. We're going to get started momentarily. What else did we talk about? Jason, you want to talk about the shirt since we're stalling here?
Sure, let's talk about the shirt. There, I got it up on the screen.
Here, go ahead. Put it up. We also, for Pirates Week, have a limited release T-shirt. Artist Rob Yo did a wonderful, one-of-a-kind design for us, and it's celebrating 50 years of Pirates of the Caribbean. It's available now on TeePublic, and you could access it by going to, what is it, Jason? WDWNT.com/store. Is that right?
I believe that's it.
There you go. It's $18, and it's only available through next week. So limited time to get this, and then we will never sell it again. So one and done, limited release shirt for the 50th anniversary of Pirates of the Caribbean. Going to tweet real quick. Is everybody ready for this this huge Back to the Future?
Is any Back to the Future small?
There have been shorter ones.
Shorter, not short.
Like, remember the Sorcerer's Hat? And you asked me, how are we going to do a Back to the Future on the Sorcerer's Hat? And then it was an hour long.
Yeah, that was kind of a different kind of Back to the Future, though.
That was long before that was even gone. We did that while that existed.
Is Country Bears the longest one we've done?
No.
That was
Country
over
Bears isn't
3
even
hours.
close.
Spaceship Earth or Imagination are two of the
Those are
longest.
both about 3.5. I think Imagination's still the longest. So we'll see what I don't think this will be. I don't think this will be 3 hours. We've gotten a little better over the years at doing this, I think. I say that cautiously. But all right, I think we're about to get started. Nick, are you ready in there? Can't hear you.
There you go. Apparently not. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Nick's in there. We haven't shown Nick
wait,
yet.
one more thing. Hold on.
Oh, Nick forgot something.
Well, let's do this.
I love that wall behind you that's made out of pirate beard. So 100% authentic pirate beard wall. It's like the worst color. Halfway between brown and burgundy.
It looks like a cork board.
It's not. It's like carpeted.
Oh.
Oh, you have wall carpet.
God, no, no.
Hey!
Please don't compare it to Epcot wall carpet. It's not even close to this.
Aw.
All right, Jason, are you ready in there?
I'm ready.
All right, well, throw up that logo, then we're going to get this thing rolling. Oh, who's doing the Where, Tom, Where? Because Scott isn't here yet.
I'll do it.
You got it? All right. All right, Nick, whenever you're ready, go for it.
Time travel commencing in T-minus 10 seconds and counting.
It's once again time to go back in time as we head back to the future on the WDW News Today podcast. Let's set our time coordinates for this week's trip through Disney Parks history with Professor Tom Corliss.
I don't mind, but you better promise me I'll be back in time.
It's time to go back.
Back, Tom! Back where, Tom? Oh, my goodness.
No, that's not it.
Where, Tom? Where?
Thank you. Oh, do you hear that? That can only mean one thing. It's time to go through the history of one of the greatest theme park attractions of all time, the Pirates of the Caribbean. In honor of its 50th anniversary, we're going from Disneyland to all the Magic Kingdoms around the world to explore the history of Pirates of the Caribbean, going from the Magic Kingdoms to the movies tonight. So let's do this. Back to the Future. Joining me for the segment, Jason Diffendahl.
Hey, howdy, hey.
Justin Heyman.
How's it going?
Nicholas Cicero.
Good day, everyone.
Ron Deanna.
Show them your larboard side.
Ashley Jasmer.
Hey, y'all.
And Eric Lancy.
I'm such a disappointment. I feel so terrible. Just
We're
throw
gonna
me
make
off
you
right
walk the
now.
plank.
Yes.
Yeah. We're gonna dunk you in a well. So yeah, we're celebrating. This is the 50th anniversary of Pirates of the Caribbean. This also is an important moment in the history of Back to the Future. This is the first one of these segments ever we are redoing. We actually did a Back to the Future on Pirates of the Caribbean way back in 2008. God, we're old. Back in 2008 on episode 30, we did this, and I decided that was such a long time ago that it was finally, well, all pun intended, time to go back. So is everybody ready for this incredible over 50-year journey we're about to take?
No, we're not ready.
We're not ready?
David Smith is here, but he
Sure.
can't get into the call.
Okay. Well, we're on live, so can't do
I know.
anything.
I'm going to work on that while you go ahead.
The glory of being live. There we go. Now I'm on camera. As you can see, I decked out the studio with a bunch of Pirates of the Caribbean garbage from my apartment. Just for the occasion. Wearing the shirt, because it was the only time the shirt is the worst color of yellow ever made.
It is.
So I decided, yeah, and I have both of them. I have the Disneyland and the Disney World. And I'm looking at them this morning. I go, these are the ugliest shirts ever made. If it wasn't for this awesome logo, there'd be no reason to ever wear the shirt. But I figured today, gotta wear this shirt.
Makes a good
right?
poster, though.
It does. It is a good poster, not with this
Yeah.
yellow. When that yellow is missing, it's
Yeah.
fantastic. Also, the mug. There's the
Aw,
There you go.
mermaids.
Well, let's get started, shall we? We got a lot to cover. Let's. Ooh, background music. How the concept of a pirate adventure was first introduced to the team of talented people that Disney had gathered to work on his theme park in the late 1950s. And some pirate-themed concept art, including a pirate shack and Bluebeard's Den, even date back to 1954. That's before the opening of Disneyland. So obviously, you got to remember the time back then. The swashbuckler, pirate films were huge back then, and westerns and swashbucklers kind of dominated, popular culture at the time. So it only makes sense that it was a park that represented a lot of popular culture. There was Frontierland, which had all of those western things going on. Why would you not have something based around pirates? But for one reason or another, didn't make it off the drawing board for opening day. But New Orleans Square, the section of Disneyland that would end up hosting Pirates of the Caribbean, was also being planned pretty early on. But in fact, by 1957, they were already talking about a New Orleans area of the park. But a lot of things, of course, got in the way. And then in the early 60s, with the expansion of the Jungle Cruise, based on the comedic ideas of Mark Davis, the proposed site of the haunted house for New Orleans was taken up by some of the expansion of that ride, and so it was left homeless. So with this happening, Walt decided instead to embark on a bigger New Orleans project called New Orleans Square, and that's kind of where everything begins. The idea for New Orleans Square, and then they sit down and decide what are the attractions going to be. Famed Disney artist Herb Ryman is credited with creating the essential look and feel of the place, which is a convincing replica of New Orleans French Quarter with important input from Disney artist Sam McKim. Plans for the land included a thieves market shopping district, an elegant restaurant on the veranda of a plantation house overlooking a moonlit bayou, and a walk-through rogues gallery wax museum. So this is Disneyland, late 50s, early 60s. An idea for a wax museum. I don't know. I've never understood this concept because I feel like even by the early 60s, Disneyland has moved beyond walk-through wax museum. The submarine voyage, the Matterhorn, the monorail are all already here. Why build a wax museum?
Why did they build them in 92 in Paris?
And that's a valid point. But studies show that Parisians love walkthroughs.
They had at least, I think every land had one there still. So I guess they're a good way to fill space in a small space, but this
they're cheaper than rides also, yeah.
Right, but here they blocked off 2 large rooms for it, like dug into the ground, so.
Yeah. And they wasted no time before the plans were even finalized. They were digging out New Orleans Square. It's like Walt was just like tired of looking at blueprints and just said, "Hey guys, just go in there, just dig a ditch. We'll figure it out later." Like, I don't understand that, but that's 60s construction for you, I guess.
Well, I think the Wax Museum too is kind of what you were starting to allude to, Tom, which is it was a cheap way to get a C ticket in. You need something else, or at least they felt like they needed something else. And I think it was probably a popular enough, well-known type of attraction. Yeah, whereas we can build a spinner type, C ticket for pretty cheap these days, or various less expensive non-e-ticket rides. But back then,
but they're working on 2
walkthroughs.
They're working on 2 walkthroughs at that point, because even the haunted house was also a walkthrough. So why are you building this whole new land? And you're like, Walt, we built the first monorail in the U.S. You have the what is it? The second largest monorail fleet in the world. What do you want to do next? Walkthroughs. I want people to walk through things. Like, doesn't it feel like a step backwards? I never understand this.
Well, maybe, but isn't we already went over that the idea was already like kind of talked about a decade earlier, 5-6 years
but
earlier.
By the 60s, like, that's never stopped Walt from redoing an idea.
Well, no, I mean, obviously, then he eventually did, but I still think at this point they were probably just this was the holdover, and this was the plan that they were going forward with.
Yeah.
And at the time, I mean, without the AAs around, it really was the best way to show real people. I mean, even the 3D figures you had on Pan and Snow White were cartoony, and if they want to do something real, this was the way to do it.
I mean, spoiler alert, they're going to invent a few things coming up soon that'll help them out here to give them new ideas.
No fast forwarding. We have plenty of script to get.
Well, I mean, that's they were right on the edge of something new. They were in between something old and something new, and that this was, I think that's what is going to be so cool about looking at the creation of this attraction, is we see that evolution, that change right here.
All right, well, let's keep moving along then. Among the assignments Walt gave to Imagineer Mark Davis in 1961 when he joined WED was the Wax Museum in the basement of the Blue Bayou Mart. The attraction had been in development since 1958, but Mark redesigned the entire thing when he was assigned the project in 61. When Walt came to Mark with the project, he said to him, Mark, there's something I'd like to do. I'd like to do an attraction on pirates, maybe Pirates of the Caribbean, and that's where the attraction gets its name. Walt came in and said, maybe the Pirates of the Caribbean. And
is that your Walt Disney impression?
No.
Oh.
No, Connor does that voice. It was terrible. Anyway. Oh, Jason, you can put that art back up. We're going to show you a couple pieces of art for the Wax Museum, the Rogues Gallery. You can keep that up, actually. We're going to talk about the Wax Museum quite a bit. In one of the earliest versions, a tour guide would take 70 guests at a time through different vignettes, telling the story of each scene. Operations decided there was no way a guide could maintain the attention of such a large group, so guests should just guide themselves with a guide spieling in each room. This eventually led to debates between WED and operations as to if it should be a walkthrough or a ride experience. So there was plenty of arguing about this Wax Museum. Are people going to ride into it? Are people going to walk through? What is it going to be? So then something pretty important happens in 1963. Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room debuts, marking the premiere of audio animatronics. And as Pirates of the Caribbean was put on hold, WED Enterprises at that moment also went to work on the 1964-65 New York World's Fair, where they would, of course, create human figures for both Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln and Progress Land, which, of course, contained the Carousel of Progress. Needless to say, the It's a Small World figures could also be called audio animatronics, but we're talking about full-form human figures in this point. With the technology created, the Wax Museum became a walkthrough that appeared to be a wax museum, but then came to life with animated figures. Is this a better idea? The fake Wax Museum? I don't understand this, but anyway, it won't last for long. So at this point in development, Mark Davis was still focusing on real Pirates of the Caribbean. Jason, we have that picture of the guy holding the flag, because I think that's based on a real pirate. Oh, there's the auctioneer. It's based on a real pirate, but it was still somewhere between the Wax Museum and the audio animatronic Wax Museum. There's some more early Mark Davis art. There we go. This is when Mark was still focusing on real pirates that had existed. So the Wax Museum was sort of a historical take, and it would be vignettes of famous pirates, through time. So yeah, that's what Mark was focusing on. When his research, however, revealed that perhaps the lives of some famous pirates were not as exciting as he thought, Mark changed his concepts to those of what people think pirates might have done. And he once again looked to inject humor into those situations. As Mark filled his office with concept sketches, he noticed Walt would ignore them every time he came in to talk about the attraction. Probably not a good sign. Mark was annoyed, but he knew it was because the idea just wasn't working. So Mark is working, his entire office covered in sketches for this Wax Museum or faux Wax Museum with audio animatronics, and Walt is just still not biting on this thing. I love that piece of concept art, by the way, the women raiding the dead pirates there. And of course, obviously, you could tell that artwork leads to a pretty important scene in the eventual attraction. There's a couple things that did make it to the ride there, but Mark's art is always so much fun to look at. Anyone have anything to say about it? No? Should we move on? David Smith is with us as well now. Hello, David.
Hey, everybody. I think what's interesting about the Wax Museum is this transfer, or this evolvement from realistic views of pirates to the much more humor based that Mark Davis is famous for. And I think it's understandable why it didn't get much of Walt's attention, because as a walkthrough, very difficult to time humor properly. So unless you have a consistent pace of an attraction and a ride, it's really difficult to present a story and humorous elements in that mode. So you can kind of understand why Walt wasn't paying much attention to it at this point, because it wasn't hitting anybody the right way, especially as the walkthrough concept came through.
I mean, and also considering what he's working on for the fair at this point, I mean, that's some pretty exciting stuff at that point. So the Disneyland operations team had been out to the World's Fair and understood that everything had changed by the time they got back to California. Disneyland was growing fast, and the impact Disney had made on the World's Fair would only bring more guests, and they would expect more. As well, it was expected anything that would come out of WED after the fair could only be as amazing, if not more so clearly be popular. And with this being said, Ops claimed they needed attractions that would be, quote-unquote, people eaters. This is the birth of the term people eaters in theme parks, which eventually would be things that have a greater, higher capacity, things that can handle more guests per hour are called people eaters. The people mover, it's a great people eater. It continuously loads. Pirates of the Caribbean, eventually we'll talk about it, would be a people eater, and even the Haunted Mansion, which followed not too long after. These are all attractions with much higher hourly capacity, of course. And again, Carousel Progress and Small World were massive capacity attractions. The boat ride system at Small World loaded a ton, and then Carousel Progress also pretty much continuously loaded because every time the theater turned, you had a fresh new theater to load. And that's way more capacity than any theater show you've ever done before. So Ops decided that was really important. And, again, and you got to remember Disneyland at the time is still full of those Fantasyland rides of the 50s, which are the slowest loading things to ever exist in all of mankind. And even the Submarine Voyage. Submarine Voyage, even one of the newer rides, still loaded pretty slow and still does to this day. So the boat system that Arrow Development had made for It's a Small World seemed like a natural fit for Pirates of the Caribbean, and so the decision was made. An October 2nd, 1962 memo from WED claimed that they had been working on several possible boat systems to turn Pirates into a ride, but none of them ever worked out. The Arrow system could succeed where the others simply would not. So this is audio animatronics is an incredibly important moment in the development of Pirates of the Caribbean, but I think honestly the bigger moment more so I think is the boat system. The boat system makes sense for the ride, and also even with audio animatronics, the ride is still this wax museum thing. So this really changes the whole landscape, not even of just the ride, but the land and the future layout of Disneyland going forward.
Right. And this is one of those decisions that always surprises me, because if you think about a Pirates ride, it's almost a logical decision to put it in a boat, to put the guests in a boat. But the fact that they didn't make the decision because of that, they made it because of just the ability to move people through the attraction that led to the boat. It's one of those happy decisions that came about. But, if you were designing a pirate ride now, you couldn't do anything other than in a boat.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to do like a soundstage. That would be really bad. More on that later, kids.
And the other thing that's kind of interesting about this whole thing is, we talk now about who makes what decisions as rides develop and as different concepts come out. And is it Ops? Is it Imagineering? Is it the finance guys? And this was a clear case of where operations kind of had some say so, but it actually helped the development of the ride. So it's not always bad, kids, to have collaboration.
Yeah. I didn't realize in researching this how much Disneyland Ops, how much say they had in things back then. Back then, I feel like I kind of thought it was just Walt dictating what they were going to do, but Disneyland Ops had a lot of things to say. And it's funny because Walt was in the park a lot. Walt, loved the park. It was his pet project. He wanted to be there a lot. So he knew, for the most part, he knew what was going on, but I guess Ops also, had their feelings on things, and they were allowed to voice that.
And just compare it to the boat systems that existed, like at the canal boats.
Storybook Land's terrible capacity.
When I first went there, when I realized it was just like a chain dragged boat still, I was like completely in shock. Because
everybody stand up all at once, or we're gonna die. How does that still exist? I don't know how Storybook Land hasn't been remodeled at this point.
And how are they not ready?
Nostalgia.
Yeah, but that doesn't stop them from other things, as we'll find out in this script.
The other thing too is that the Storybook Land canal boat ride is actually something that could certainly be done as a walkthrough, and it probably would have much higher capacity as a walkthrough.
Yeah,
You're right.
Talk about how funny that is.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they thought of a walkthrough as having higher capacity than a boat ride because they looked at Storybook Land.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And maybe they wouldn't make the mistakes of the Sleeping Beauty Castle walkthrough, which is 3.5 feet wide.
I mean, just for capacity, there's nothing in the Magic Kingdom that can get anywhere near Pirates. I mean, it's 800 more an hour than even Mansion.
Yeah, I mean, those boats are just so big. And Mansion would probably do better if they could get rid of the stretch. If the stretch rooms weren't there, Mansion would be unstoppable.
But I don't think so. I mean, the OHRC was just so operational hourly ride capacity was just so different. It was 3,200 for Pirates.
Yeah.
Before Fast Pass. I don't know how it got affected by that, but
yeah.
So now it's like 1,200. So
now it's Toy Story Mania. Enjoy. And I mean before the third track. Maybe we'll get a third track of Pirates.
We need a second track.
Well, there is a third load. Maybe a third load above that drops into.
There you go. Yes,
into the main.
Because
that could be the thrill
load,
drop.
That third load at Splash Mountain is always so helpful.
They use it all the time now. Finally, it was a long time that sat there doing nothing, but more often than not, I see that used now. But when they do run that, they do pretty good numbers too. They could probably do pirate-like numbers there. So they finally got their boat ride, and a boat ride would require the one trade-off was a boat ride would require much more real estate than the 2 floors they carved out in New Orleans Square. In fact, it wouldn't even fit in the park. All of this required some major restructuring of the project to utilize what was already done and redesign what had not yet reached construction. It was a massive undertaking. Walt decided they would send guests down drops for the 2 basement rooms that existed, using them to go under the railroad and send the boats to a new building outside of the park. The land for the show building would be reclaimed from the failed Holiday Land project, a space for corporate functions and private events. Construction on New Orleans Square began again in 1965, and Pirates of the Caribbean was finally happening. So this is well, Small World did it too, but this ride breaks the berm. It goes outside what was physically the park, which, again, Small World did just before this. And I guess that's probably where they got the idea. And then they did it many, many more times after that. Haunted Mansion, some of Splash Mountain, Indiana Jones Adventure, Space Mountain, all these things that go outside. Or is Space Mountain outside the train? No, it's
Space Mountain in Florida is.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm confusing. Yeah, so Indy, Small World, all of Toontown eventually ends up beyond the train, and even some upcoming expansions, extending the park beyond the perimeter of the railroad. So with this happening, Mark Davis got back to work on sketches for the now Pirates ride. Jason, we could pull up some of those amazing Mark Davis sketches.
Yep, let's look at. So there's Mark Davis.
That is Mark Davis, yes.
This is some early concept art.
We think that's Wax Museum.
We think this is Wax Museum, and we think this is Wax Museum concept art as well. There's Sam McKim working on the Rogues Gallery, which was an early concept Wax Museum concept as well.
Yeah.
And then we've got to talk a little bit about the exterior of the building too, because Herb Ryman put together some fantastic concept art for the exterior. Here's one look at that. Here's a really neat picture.
I love this piece. I've seen this piece a million times. This sells New Orleans Square. Like, I feel like this captures it better than the actual land does. It's just such a great piece.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And then, so the actual show building of Pirates, or the facade of Pirates, was actually based on this building in Louisiana.
Oh yeah, that top piece is.
Yeah, you can look at the center 3 windows here, and then go back here and look at how the center 3 windows are coming out of the front facade of the building. So, this building, I think, is the Cabildo building in Louisiana. It was where the Louisiana Purchase was signed, actually.
You know what's funny is you're talking about this now. I didn't even realize when I went. We went in there. I've been in there.
It's in Jackson Square, I think.
It's a really neat
in the
museum.
quarter.
And because it's clearly it's not identical, because if you look at it, and obviously I've been to Disneyland enough in my life. Walking up to it, it doesn't scream.
No, it doesn't. Well, right.
Look at that top piece. It is absolutely.
It's right there.
Piece. Yeah.
Yep.
And I was
totally right there.
I was going to comment that the art piece here looks like something you would buy, like from one of the vendors right in the middle of Jackson Square, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all Sam McKim. And it's a Sam McKim, right? Or is that the
this one?
What the last one?
The one before.
I think this is Herb Ryman.
Oh, it's Herb. Okay. Yeah, that's a great one. Love that.
Yeah, really nice. There's another sort of take on it.
Yeah, you can see the covered area at French Market there. Off to the right side.
On the right of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's Sam McKim working on.
Is there a gun pointed at him? There's like a pirate gun.
It looks like
pointed straight at him. Yeah.
It absolutely
pistol.
That's Walt saying, "Get to work."
Those were the typical working conditions.
Here's some more exterior concept art. And then
for one of the shops.
I'm not sure what that is. Actually,
I think it was going to be the facade at one point.
Yeah. And we can talk about some of the maps that they drew of the layouts for the walkthrough and see how it changed over time.
Yeah.
But here you've got one of the first walkthrough maps. You can see the ship in the middle, and guests would walk through, follow the red dotted lines. This was further refined then to a second layout shown here, where guests would follow the dotted lines as they walk through and watch little vignettes. And then here's the third one.
Guests would follow the dotted lines.
In theory, yeah. Here's the third one, and this is actually this final walkthrough layout was going to be the basement in New Orleans Square, and so the buildings in New Orleans Square that were ultimately built were built based on this design as a walkthrough, even before the idea was made for a boat ride. Those buildings were spec'd out and constructed based on this walkthrough layout.
And if you look at that walkthrough, you're going to see some stuff that kind of looks familiar. They definitely carry some stuff over from the Wax Museum part. I mean, there was a lot of work done and a lot of good ideas were hatched. So why not recycle some of that when you're turning it into a boat ride?
Sure, absolutely. There's Mark Davis. This is one of the vignettes that Mark had drawn that was going to be an example of what the guests would see in the walkthrough.
And this is when it has the animatronic host of each scene, because that guy in the forefront would have been audio animatronic. Yeah.
Yes, so he would be telling the story of what was going on as the scene unfolded.
Are those guys in the back playing chess? Is that where it almost looks like in the queue, the guys that are playing chess.
I think they're just
over there on the left. Or are they just?
I think they're just drinking. I'm not even saying that as a joke. Like, I'm looking real close. I think they're just getting plastered.
I don't see a chess piece.
Okay, for a split second it looked.
But then Mark did all sorts of artwork for this attraction.
Mark's character sketches
are amazing.
Pirates are probably my favorite pieces of art ever done for the Disney parks. Those pigs. And the thing with the animals, I think, in the attraction is so many of them, they don't look like real animals, but they're something about the design of them that's so pleasing to the human eye. And Blaine, when he sculpted Mark's concept art, gave them so much character. It's undeniable when you see them. And even, Jason, if you could switch back to me for a second. I know this is going to be a silly example, but above my mic, there is a Tsum Tsum for the pig. And just looking at even the Tsum Tsum, that is undeniably Mark's the style he picked for the pigs in the ride. I mean, it's a very distinct style, and this is like this ride that's supposed to be about these real people that existed, but Mark gave it this real cartoony edge, and something about it really works. I don't know why, but Mark's art just really comes to life well in this attraction.
And
auctioneer.
There's some more. The auctioneer. Again.
Kind of creepy there.
Yep. There's the dog with the keys. Hairy leg.
Foot pirate.
Yep.
Foot pirate. Hairy leg. Does anyone remember? I know I'm jumping ahead. In the mid 2000s, Walt Disney World TV had a commercial for Pirates of the Caribbean that was almost made like a 60s sci-fi movie commercial or B-movie ad where it'd be like, come see them blow up the city. Come see this. Come see that. And then the end it goes, see the hairy leg. And I just thought it was the funniest thing. It was the era where the Not to Zoo commercials were a thing. It was all in that era. Dinosaur had a funky, like 60s style B-movie ad too at the time. Regardless. All right, Jason, we're starting to get towards the ride now. So let's
now we're getting back to the ride.
Let's go back to the script a little bit then. Let's see where we are in our story. So Walt decided again through those 2 basement rooms that existed, they were going to send people down drops and they were send them out to a show building. So Mark Davis got back to work on the sketches for the now Pirates ride, with Walt now very interested in what he was doing. Mark was also excited to build a ride with an original storyline from scratch, one they could craft completely from start to finish. Something that the Fantasyland rides didn't allow since they were adaptations of films, and something he didn't get to do for the Jungle Cruise or the Submarine Voyage. Of course, Jungle Cruise existed before Mark came through in the early 60s and developed those new scenes. And Submarine Voyage, they kind of just slapped some ideas for scenes together. It didn't really have a strong narrative. This was the first time they were really going to focus on putting a ride together with, a really strong story from start to finish. Meanwhile, Claude Coates got to work on designing the sets that Mark's pirate characters would live in. Claude was also responsible for how the scenes would lay out. Quote, Claude was excellent at laying out rides, Harriet Burns said. He was always the best at getting the most out of a space. So Mark Davis drawing these sketches, and Claude is figuring out how we're going to lay this thing out in this giant show building that we're putting out back at Disneyland now. Of course, a very important part of Pirates of the Caribbean would be the song. So let's talk about that a little bit. Meanwhile, Francis Xavier Atencio was called to work at WED in 1965, moved over by Walt from the animation department. He was asked to script the Pirates ride, even though he had zero experience in writing. Sure, he did storyboarding at the studio for some of the animated films, but he wasn't a writer. Inspired by books about the topic, his Spanish heritage, and films of the time, namely Treasure Island, Blackbeard the Pirate, and more, X got to work on creating a recognizable pirate script for guests to relate to. Working from Mark's sketches, Atencio began writing, and he started with the auction scene. Imagine that. He started with probably the scene with the most recognizable and quotable lines. And that's where he decided he was going to start writing this attraction. Nobody? Anybody? With the auction scene being somewhat controversial in manner, the auction for a bride idea was hatched and the banner put into the scene, making it clear to guests that no advantages would be taken of the women. Walt was leery about the scene, but it somehow made the final cut.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
With Walt leery that the attraction was a little un-Disney, X convinced him that a sea shanty could soften the experience for guests. X figured, yes, kids, that's right. It's perfectly fine if you're singing while you do it. X figured that the Sherman brothers would be brought in to write it, but when he sang a little of the chorus idea that was in his head, Walt loved it and instead asked him to do it.
Hey X, how about you don't know how to you don't know how to design rides, but we're gonna have you design this ride. You don't normally write songs. We're gonna have you write the song. Like, this is amazing that X Atencio on his first task at these things.
But this is the story of Walt with everyone.
I was gonna say that was his gift. He knew. It's like he had
everyone
a sixth sense. He knew how to
that story the same way.
He knew what people's talents were deep down.
Yeah, and he figured, X sang like 2 seconds of chorus. He was like, yep, you're doing it. Luckily, George Bruns was assigned, though, to create the tune. Atencio got to write the lyrics that went with it. And Yo-Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me, would be recorded by the Mellowmen, a Disney singing group who had already performed in Lady and the Tramp and Alice in Wonderland. The group was comprised of Bill Cole, Bill Lee, Max Smith, and Thurl Ravenscroft, who would later take the lead on Grim Grinning Ghosts for the Haunted Mansion, as well as be cast as Tony the Tiger for Kellogg's cereal. They're great. Atencio also somehow became a director, having to coach voice actors through the audio recordings for the attraction's cast of characters. Paul Frees would perform many of the parts, including the immortal Dead Men Tell No Tales. And Paul in other media was Boris Badenov from Rocky and Bullwinkle. He was also Ludwig von Drake and would later go on to be the ghost host in The Haunted Mansion. Veteran actor, character actor J. Pat O'Malley, who voiced Colonel Hathy, Cyril the Horse, and Tweedledee and Tweedledum in some animated films, would play the hook-handed pirate at the well scene, as well as a jailed buccaneer. X himself would end up giving himself the best parts. He would play the talking skull at the beginning of the attraction and the pirate with the hairy leg. So imagine this. X Atencio gives himself what ends up being two of the most quintessential characters. Not that, I mean, there's obviously a lot of beloved characters in this ride, but the hairy leg and the talking skull are pretty iconic, and X ends up not only coming over from the storyboard department in animation, but he writes the script, he ends up doing the song, he directs the voiceover work, and then he ends up voicing two characters in the ride.
Well, if he had to do all that work, he might as well give himself some.
Right? Why wouldn't he want to do the fun part?
It wasn't. I don't think Wed was union back then.
No, but it's not about that. If you're doing all that work, you got to give yourself some good lines to do.
I mean, yeah, now we think of them as good parts, but I'm not sure that at the time.
Yeah,
nobody was saying, "Hey, I really want that hairy leg pirate role." That's
Actually, yeah, I'm sure no one was saying that. Maybe X got it by default because no one else wanted it.
Like, you think they're in the room like raising hands for parts, and someone's like, "I want to play the drunk guy with the cats." Drunk guy with the cats, come on.
Back then, would they do temp tracks, and did they just like end up keeping them, or were they always intended to be the final ones?
Well, it said he coached them through it, so.
I mean, temp tracks exist from Pirates, so. I mean, Mansion has a lot of them too. So they would do that, and maybe they thought he sounded good on them, and they just kept him. Completely possible.
I just wanted to show.
What are we looking at?
This is a blueprint, old blueprint that I dug up.
Blueprint of what?
of the Pirates ride.
Is that the gondolas?
No, shut up. So if you look at the top, that's where it's going to turn by Caribbean Beach. Never mind.
No, this is a blueprint of the Pirates ride.
That's the show building outside the berm. Yes. You can see that real narrow part is where you go right under and then back through.
And then back through. So load is over here in the upper right.
But that's a good view of Claude Coates' work, of being able to cram so much into that small space.
It's such a weird shaped building too.
Is,
I mean,
yeah.
And the flume's big. I mean, they're wide boats. Yeah. So to figure that out and that weird shape, and what's interesting is that weird shape then pretty much carries out to Paris, even though they had the land to build any shape they wanted. The Paris show building somehow ends up being that shape. Like, it's so weird. Like, they just decided, all right, that works. Let's do it.
But then they flip it upside down, basically.
Yeah. But there you go. I'm still bewildered by 60s construction, like how it goes off the page and becomes real without mistakes. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, without computers, with nothing more than like a tape measure and some nails.
It's insane. It's insane how people did that. So let's talk about sculpting the Pirates. Former animator Blaine Gibson was chosen to sculpt the figures for the ride. Blaine was responsible for Abraham Lincoln at the World's Fair, as well as earlier figures such as the Jungle Cruise animals and props for the submarine voyage. So this really came as no surprise when he was given the job. Starting with miniatures, Blaine began to bring Mark's ideas to life. All of the heads sculpted for the ride ended up being characters of people that Blaine and the other sculptors knew, but they never revealed the identity of those people over time. But Blaine was quoted later on as saying he could just picture the big man he saw eating at a restaurant that he sketched down, eventually riding the ride and realizing that was him in the well. So yeah, that happened. Blaine's models would become the stars of the model of the attraction as well. One of the cornerstones of the model shop at the time was Harriet Burns, along with Fred Jorger and Wathel Rogers. Blaine collaborated with Harriet and Fred on the model. The model created the ride scene by scene with the ability of the figures to be moved, which would allow Walt and the Imagineers to perfectly place them before construction began. Jason, we don't have the video for that, do we?
No, but I've got some pictures. Hang on.
You do? Okay. Yeah, because if you watch tell people to go watch it. The Disneyland Tencennial television special, Ambassador Julie Ream gets a walkthrough with Walt of the model. And you'll even see the little rings they look through and stuff, but there's the model. You see Walt with it there. And it's really neat to watch Walt tour her through the model, and you could really get the size and scale of it. It's really, really neat. The model also included, as I just mentioned, rings where the Imagineers could stand to get the view guests would get from the boat, something that had never been done before. It quickly became the largest model they had ever made. It eventually was over 40 feet long. A 40-foot-long model. Incredible work just leading up to this attraction. Oh, wait, can we go back to the construction? That construction pic is really... I know it's out of order, but I really
This is the one I was
that.
trying to pull up with Julie.
Now you got me interested in something else.
Yeah, this is a really incredible...
Look at that out there. You'll see the dirt patch out to the right.
Yep.
You see what's going to be New Orleans Square, and then out beyond the berm, what's going to be the Pirate Show building. And the first time they decided to rip up some of that Disneyland parking lot.
Yep. So you can definitely see how little room there really was.
Yeah.
In New Orleans Square. That even though going underground, there still wasn't a room enough for a ride system.
No, New Orleans Square is a really small footprint even compared to the show building. You can see it there. And if you look real close out by those trees all the way out to the right, there's Walt Disney pointing out to the parking lot saying, someday there's going to be a giant orange here. Giant orange filled with bees. And a restaurant called Malaburritos. It'll be glorious. It's going to take us 40 years to get there, but I promise you guys, we'll make it.
It'll make it all worth it.
Yep. And then way back at the top, you can see that circus tent that's going to become Garden Walk.
Yeah, the strip mall of Anaheim doesn't exist yet at that point. Look at that. It's crazy.
No, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. That parking lot's so big. It's unbelievable. So if we get back on topic, Jason, you go back to the picture we wanted to show people before I got distracted by cool stuff. So there's Julie Ream, the first ambassador of Disneyland. They started the program for the Tencennial. With Walt. Walt is holding one of Blaine's little models in front of Mark Davis's concept art. So this covers all the bases for us. Yeah, it's really neat. Look at that camera.
It's so little.
Is that a flash cube?
It is a flash cube.
Yep.
Oh, look it up, kids. So at this time, Mark Davis's wife, Alice Davis, was hired to costume the Pirates on the Ride, the largest fleet of audio animatronics to date. Walt was so enamored with her work on It's a Small World, even though she added pantaloons to the Can-Can Girls, that he brought her on board this project. The story for another day. AA costumes are a unique challenge in that they must look like normal human clothes, but allow for all the movement and wiring of a robotic character. Quote, the redhead was a real problem, as from right below her bust to her hips was nothing but a 2-inch tube. And you thought Barbie had unrealistic goals for women.
Oh, boy.
Velcro was used to realistically attach clothes around objects attached to the characters. As you know, the wiring would come up through whatever was underneath or to the sides of the characters. So some of them are sitting on barrels, some of them sitting on steps or whatever. So they end up using Velcro. There's a completely naked audio animatronic. We're ruining the magic for everyone tonight.
We are.
That's
so creepy.
Mr. Coot, I believe, is the name of that character on the cannon in the finale scene.
And I'd imagine trying to build a costume for that to make him look like this.
There you go. It's insane. It's amazing. It's, even all these 50 years later, that's unbelievable.
And by the way, Velcro was just invented for the space program.
That's right. Velcro. People, you probably growing up, you think Velcro is one of those things that's been around forever. Velcro was new in the 60s. So that's cutting edge again.
Didn't Epcot teach us it's called hook and loop fastener?
Oh, look at that.
Those are at least a little more shaped bodies around all of
and that's
the,
what she had to dress.
Yep.
So
wow.
Velcro was also good because it would allow for easy access for replacement or maintenance. And that, kids, is what the inside of a goat looks like.
That is one special goat.
Call back. Oh, no one got it. Alice also realized that a backup set of wardrobe would be needed for replacement, but Wed told her it wasn't in the budget. So what did Alice do? Lie, of course. She said every costume cost twice as much, and she made them anyway. This foresight allowed Disneyland to avoid disaster, however, when in the early days of the attraction caught fire. So 2 months after the ride opened, ironically, the burning town scene catches fire, animatronics melt. Luckily, a second set of clothing is ready to go.
It caught fire when it opened. They just didn't notice for 2 months.
Slow burning.
We'll get there. It's a lot of cleavage on that. Been slightly toned down over the years, I believe.
Who wants the redhead?
Yeah. 1960s, that feels like a lot at Disney in 1967. Anyway, Alice even had the idea to put bras on the ladies in the chase scene, including a device that would make it appear as if their bosom was bouncing as they ran.
That's a device she should have patented.
Hooray for realism? I don't know.
Wow. Yeah, that's attention to detail that boggles the mind.
Where's the Baywatch attraction?
What was that?
Where's the Baywatch attraction?
Oh, jeez. Yep. I mean, and speaking of,
is that Leota?
Detail, yes.
Yeah.
And you can look at some of the detail on these sculptures.
Those heads are so scary outside.
They are. Can you imagine, waking up and seeing this, and it'd be like, whoa.
And so the reason why those look a lot more cartoony than they do now, they were toned down over time, and once more modern techniques were made to build the latex and stuff, the faces do get a little more normal looking eventually. But you'll see even like the pooped pirate, which Walt is next to there. I love that picture so much. The pooped pirate pretty much looks like he does
looks
today.
so concerned.
Yeah, I love that. So this is when Walt is picking out the faces for certain characters. It's such a good picture. There's more of the heads. Is that Blaine back there?
I believe so.
Yeah. It's really neat. Where was I? Gotta find my place. Oh, yeah, let's talk about audio animatronics a little more. Even with Lincoln and other attractions under their belts, Imagineers didn't quite know what to do with all the figures in Pirates of the Caribbean, and admittedly, many had very simple movements. The subtleties found in Lincoln's performance would be found here, but in fairness, there was plenty more to look at than a pirate in the background. Wathel, Rogers, and Mapo would fabricate the huge fleet of figures for the ride. Meanwhile, Yale Gracie was figuring out how to safely set an entire room on fire. How did he do it? His original test was a hubcap he found on the 405 and some crinkly mylar. Eventually, mylar, a light, and a fan were used to create the final effect, brilliant in its simplicity. The effect was so realistic that the Anaheim Fire Department almost didn't clear the permits for the attraction since they wouldn't know if there was a real fire in the room or not. Arrow Development's Carl Bacon recalls walking through the set with Anaheim's Fire Department chief. Quote, I remember the head of the fire department coming through the lower doors way down there, and he looked up and saw it and said, you can't have a fire in here. As he got closer, he saw that it was done with colored plastic. He was going to shut them down. Imagine that. It was so convincing. Never been seen before. But it's literally a fan, a light, and at the time, mylar is all that's making that fire.
Isn't it still mylar?
No. After the fire, 2 months later, they switched to satin sheets. The mylar caught on fire because mylar is flammable.
Did it just get too hot with the light bulb?
Yep, that's
I think so. So,
imagine people going through and being like, "It really looks like it's on fire," and it actually is that time.
It actually was. Well, I dug up some pretty neat construction photos too that we can look at. This is a New Orleans Square exterior.
We're not there yet, so let's hold these for a moment. We're going to get to construction.
We'll hold them.
We're still building the ride at Mapo and Wed at this point.
Jason, stop leaving the time machine. Stay with us.
Jason, Justin, stop drinking out of your girl mug.
And Tom,
mug alone.
To your point a few minutes ago about the animals, the animatronic animals, not necessarily looking real or lifelike, but there's a charm about them that's a realism. I think the same thing applies with the fire. Nobody's really, I think, today is mistaking it for fire, but there is a charm to it that you can almost imagine feeling the heat. You imagine it being a real fire. There's almost a suspension of disbelief with some of the effects in the animatronics on the attraction.
But I don't think your brain even registers that it's not fire. I think it's supposed to be fire. I think you see that scene in full as you pull in and you just go, wow, they're singing and this town's on fire. And unless you really stop and stare at it, you don't really think about, oh, that's just a sheet with the light. I think it still looks so good in the background, even though it's extremely dated, that it doesn't matter. Like, I think it's... I think it's the
overall, it's the overall atmosphere of that whole scene. I mean, I think if you were like walking through there and just saw that scene alone and by itself, you'd be like, that looks fake. But you're in the whole, experience.
There's a sky above you, like another effect Yale created. There's that the moving clouds going on the roof of the show building. It really looks like you're in this real place. There's clouds rolling by. That's still in use today. They've never updated that projection effect. They're still using Yale's projected clouds.
And even when you see a vent in those clouds, you see from the building itself, you'll see a vent. It doesn't detract from it at all. You really do. You know that that's supposed to be sort of a moving scene at night, and you buy into it. There's never a moment where it's not encapsulating. And Jason said it's dated, but I think it's well dated. It's not something that comes off as sort of cheesy. It comes off as sort of elegant in how it's dated.
Yeah.
I will say too, for as much as we're making fun of the fire in a way, I believe even to this day, due to the fire issues that were first brought up by those fire marshals way back when, in order to have a Pirates Ride construction, and back then the technology probably didn't exist, but those all have to shut down if a fire alarm is actually triggered in the building, so that they can know the difference between real fire and fake fire. So the flames actually must be tied into the fire system and deactivate.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Not that I think they confuse it now, but I'm sure it helps in the heat of the moment. Well, no pun intended. Anyway. Test drive. By 1966, the attraction was nearing completion, and many of the sets, props, and figures were sitting at WED waiting for delivery. In order to see the finished product before sending it off, Imagineers set up the attraction at the Glendale headquarters for a walkthrough. However, Walt Disney wouldn't walk through. He was given a ride through so he could see what the guests would see. But how do you do this without flooding the building and putting boats in it? Well, you set up a dolly and you push your boss through the ride. And that's what they did. During the ride, Atencio apologized for the pirates talking over each other. Walt stopped him and said, "Don't worry about it. It's like a cocktail party. People come to cocktail parties and they tune in a conversation over here, then a conversation over there. Each time a guest comes through here, they'll hear something completely different." Walt loved that they talked over each other. And they still kind of do today, and it's amazing. They were right. You just, as you get further away from that scene, your attention is just drawn to the next one, and you pick up that next conversation, and your brain just shuts off. Like, even if you're passing, I think about passing the well scene, your brain just sort of shuts off that scene is happening, and you're fully immersed in that auction happening. And again, that's all those considerations they take. Claude figuring out like how much space between the scenes and where the characters are going to be and everything. And this ride just does all of that so right every single second. Your eyes just the attraction knows how to send your eyes where they need to go, and it's unbelievable.
Well, and part of the brilliance of the best Disney attractions is you get to notice different things every time you go through, and the fact that he purposefully did that, and it seems like, I guess, that they kind of stumbled upon it, but Walt liked it and decided that was the way they were going. But he probably already had that kind of mentality in his head by this point.
It's true. All right, well, let's talk about New Orleans Square. Jason, if you want to pull up those New Orleans Square construction photos, probably do that. Because we're going to talk about the opening of New Orleans Square. On July 24th of 1966, Walt Disney opened the first new land at Disneyland since the park had opened, New Orleans Square. Since then, only 3 lands have been added to the park. There was Bear Country in 1972, although those kind of already existed as other stuff. Mickey's Toontown was added in 1992. Do you know what the third one is? Star Wars Land in 2019. Only the 4th land added to the park since the opening. Total cost of the project was $17 million, with $8 million going to Pirates of the Caribbean. To give you an idea, $17 million was the cost of Disneyland in 1955. And they were spending that alone on Pirates and New Orleans Square. New Orleans Square at this point, the budget does not include the Haunted Mansion either, so keep that in mind. So, Jason, go ahead if you want to describe what's going on there.
So this is just some early construction photos of New Orleans Square. You can kind of see finished product here. Here's another one. This is the front facade that matches the Cabildo building in New Orleans.
Yeah.
This is that front of that building. And then here's kind of the corner where Pirates is located. So that second floor, the second floor there is what became the Disney Gallery. That was originally designed to be a private apartment for Walt.
Yeah, well, I have that right here. Let me get into that. The Blue Bayou restaurant was supposed to open with the land that's downstairs, but was delayed until Pirates was finished. Walt didn't like the idea of opening the restaurant before the adjoined ride. He didn't think it made sense that people would be sitting there with no boats going by. As well, WED press release at the time remarked that the land was not done. It was still the ride to finish, the Blue Bayou to open, and work upstairs on the private club and Walt's apartment. So, yeah, as Jason just alluded to, that second floor was originally going to be Walt's new apartment. And then, of course, we'll get to why that didn't happen.
Yep. So,
but eventually did become the Disney Gallery later, and then eventually the Dream Suite with the Disney Gallery moving to Main Street.
And fun fact, when it was still a Disney Gallery, that second floor was about sort of a balcony area, veranda up there. You could get Phantasmic dessert party packages.
Yeah.
And watch Phantasmic from there, which was a spectacular spot. And then this artwork here is concept art by Dorothea Redmond of the Blue Bayou restaurant. And it's pretty spot on with what actually was built. Yeah. That's how much they liked her concept art, was that they duplicated it almost perfectly.
Yeah.
And that hangs in the Dream Suite.
I was going to say a bunch of Dorothea's stuff is in the Dream Suite.
It's amazing.
It's perfect. Yeah. The Dream Suite, if you ever get the chance to go in there for some reason, is, I still think, the greatest thing. I'm going to tell the Dream Suite story real quick.
Okay.
That was the day I'd never been to Club 33. We had our Club 33 reservation. I was super excited. Never been. A friend rigged a tour of the Dream Suite for us before Club 33. We did the Dream Suite tour. That ruined Club 33 for me. Club 33 was terrible compared to the tour of the Dream Suite, because you're standing there. It's supposed to be what was going to be Walt's bedroom, and through the walls you hear the load music for Pirates of the Caribbean playing from downstairs. It's unbelievably cool.
I just toured it in December, and it was amazing. And they actually said that they're supposed to stop the Dream Suite tours this spring.
They did for the 21 Royal.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
But it was absolutely amazing to go through that, and the tour is just it's amazing to hear the story, to see how it was restored, and then to see just the hidden things throughout the suite. I absolutely that was a highlight of my last trip when I was there in December.
Yeah, and we will do a Back to the Future on New Orleans Square at some point. This obviously Pirates has enough history to it. We didn't want to overload this, but we will dive into the Dream Suite at some point because it deserves talking about.
Just real quickly, Tom, for some context on the cost of this expansion, adjusting for inflation, the attraction itself would be about $60 million in current dollars, and the whole land was about 128 million. Just for reference.
And in today's construction, it would take 6 years to build.
Right, exactly.
And would include Avatar. Anyway. Oh, that's such a cool construction photo. I haven't seen that one.
This is one of the coolest. Yep.
Yeah, and that's, of course, that burning town scene. Wow. So that's New Orleans Square. So around this time, Walt's health started to deteriorate after years of smoking Lucky Strikes. Some of Walt's closest friends, family, and coworkers knew that the problem was quite serious, though. When Walt visited a hospital to have a portion of his lung removed, his left lung, on November 21st, 1966. The Disney company issued reports about him receiving treatment for an old polo injury. Good job, PR department. Walt was quite worried about the effect that his death might have on the value of the company for the shareholders, so he obviously wanted to keep it a secret. However, he didn't really need to worry. His brother Roy would continue his legacy and started working right away with WED on the ongoing projects, such as Pirates of the Caribbean and the Florida Project. Upon Walt's passing on December 15, 1966, newspaper, radio, television, and world leaders around the globe mourned the loss and praised his legacy. Quote, in late 1966, Walt was diagnosed with lung cancer. Years of smoke, or is that the same thing I just read? Yeah, pretty much. We can skip that. Just before Walt passed on his last visit to Disneyland, he walked through the progress of Pirates of the Caribbean. The channel was finished and walkable. Jason, pretty much probably what you just showed is probably what Walt saw at that time. Because Tony Baxter talks about when he got to ride through when Walt actually passed away a couple weeks later, that there were no figures installed yet, but the scenes were mostly done. This is probably what Walt saw before he passed away. That's about where the ride was as far as installation at Disneyland. Now, that being said, he had seen the mock-up at WED, but on the physical site, that's probably the last thing he saw. Again, the channel was finished and walkable, so Walt took a stroll through. This was while the first of the programming had been going on. The auction scene is what they were up to at the time. And Walt watched the auctioneer fully programmed and go through all his motions. Mark Davis said to him, "It's a hell of a waste." Walt said, "No, Mark, it's not a waste. We do so much return business down here. The next time people come in, they'll see something they hadn't noticed before." So Mark was convinced, why were they spending all this time programming the auctioneer and building this figure that had all the functionality and movement and character of the Lincoln figure? Then guess we're just going to float by it in a matter of a couple seconds. And Walt said to him, but people are going to come back, and every time they come back, they're going to see something different. And of course, Walt was right, because anyone probably watching this has been back over and over and over again.
Yeah, and this is really an amazing statement that Walt made, understanding the idea that on an attraction of this level, you don't want to limit yourself to just those few seconds that the guests see because of those return visits. You want to provide something just a slightly new for each time you go through. So the vision to understand that even Mark at the time didn't quite understand. Yeah. I mean, he would obviously pick it up later and embrace it, and all of WED and then WDI embraced it. But at this point, there was still a sense that you only programmed what the guests would immediately see and not worry necessarily about the future. So this is really an impressive moment to me in terms of Walt's vision for what these attractions should be and would be.
Absolutely. On Walt's last visit to WED, which was after his surgery in November 1966, he met with Roger Broggie. Roger told him that Disneyland Operations was pushing hard to open the ride for Christmas. Walt told Roger to tell them they had to wait until the ride was done. Walt told Roger, "You decide when the ride opens." Walt then went into Mark's office to see concepts for the Country Bear Jamboree. And, of course, as the story goes, as Walt was leaving, he said, "Goodbye, Mark." Walt never said goodbye, apparently. Walt would always say, "See you later," or something like that. But Walt walked about 50 feet down the hallway and said goodbye, Mark. And Mark remembered that very vividly, as again, he was not used to the boss saying that. So they kind of had the feeling this would be the last time they would see him. They said in the meetings and stuff they had that day, Walt looked very tired. He didn't look like himself. So that was his last meeting at WED Enterprises. And of course, Walt passed away, and with Walt gone, the team, of course, decided they had to go on and complete Pirates of the Caribbean for him, promising they wouldn't open until it was absolutely ready. And the ride would be ready not long after that, though. Pirates of the Caribbean finally soft opened on March 18th, 1967, thus the 50th anniversary being this week, with the media festivities planned for April 19th. What began as a 2-story basement walkthrough is now a 1,838-foot flume through a 112,826 square foot building. Disneyland had never seen anything like this before, and it became the standard of Disney quality for the 5 decades that would follow. Pirates of the Caribbean, of course, was an instant hit, and perhaps was the moment where the company and the public realized that Walt Disney Productions would continue to be, even without their leader still here. On August 24th, 1968, in fact, more guests experienced Pirates of the Caribbean in one day than any other theme park attraction ever. They set a new one-day ride attendance record with that amazing hourly capacity of Pirates of the Caribbean in 1968. Of course, the grand opening, while it happened in April of 67, was not televised until an opening special on The Wonderful World of Disney, January 28th, 1968. Jason, we don't have that video.
I'm going to work on getting it while you talk about it.
The episode, Disneyland, from the Pirates of the Caribbean to the World of Tomorrow. Of course, at the same time, you got to remember, 1967. Not only do they build New Orleans Square, not only do they open Pirates of the Caribbean, this is the year in which they completely rip down and rebuild Tomorrowland at Disneyland. New Tomorrowland at Disneyland, including the People Mover and Carousel of Progress, happened simultaneously. So anytime you go to the Disney parks and you want to go on about, there's too much construction happening right now, I don't like all these work walls, I want you to think about the fact that 2 sides of Disneyland were pretty much completely closed for a 2-year period around this time. So think about that. Tomorrowland was bulldozed at this time. Anyway. So featuring the TV special would be Pirates, but also the People Mover and Carousel of Progress. The show starts by replaying parts of that 1965 episode where Walt tours the Pirates model at Imagineering. The episode then goes on to show the opening day ceremonies. The press there to cover the opening of Pirates of the Caribbean was all put aboard the Columbia sailing ship, which was then boarded and taken over by pirates who were sailing on the rivers of America. The pillaging included the ship's crew walking the plank and actresses in period costume being hauled off by some of the pirates and made to serve drinks to the press. The ship then docked and the pirate actors led the press to the ride, where after a battle with guards out front, they were allowed to board. Viewers are then treated to a 10-minute ride-through video before the focus shifts back to Tomorrowland. So I want to give you this idea. Today, with all the social media and YouTube and all the things we have, Disney won't put up like full ride-throughs when rides open. The Wonderful World of Disney, on several occasions, provided pretty much full ride-throughs narrated by Walt or a narrator. Pirates had it. When they do the World's Fair special, they show you all of It's a Small World. They go through the whole thing. So even at this time, they showed you the full ride, and it did amazing things publicity-wise, as we'll talk about when we get to Florida. This one TV special stuck with people for this ride-through.
You want to watch a little bit of it? I think I got it queued up here.
Can we pull it up? That'd be great.
I'm going to try to feed the audio.
That would be awesome.
So can you see it now?
I see Julie Ream with Walt, yeah.
All right, good. Here we go.
So let's enjoy this. I don't know if we're going to get audio, but otherwise, this is Walt showing. You can see the Haunted Mansion there, interestingly enough, the model of the mansion in that big New Orleans square mile. So at this point, the mansion is in development as well, but it'll be the next phase of New Orleans Square, and there obviously is the model. And Walt's hand is on the show building for Pirates of the Caribbean. Oh, I hear it a little bit. Walt point out the streets. If not, I'll keep narrating. It's not a big deal. There's the concept art for Walt calls it the Blue Lagoon, Blue Bayou. Walt misnames a lot of things in this TV special, if you ever watched it. He doesn't know the name of the Haunted Mansion. He calls it the House of Illusions at one point. Julie Ream, of course, the first Disneyland ambassador.
Well,
did they have fully official names at that point?
Haunted Mansion, yeah. Raleigh or whoever he talks to corrects him and says Haunted Mansion. He goes, "That's right, Haunted Mansion."
Well, they still talk about that as a walkthrough too with the museum stuff, don't they?
Yeah, well, it was a Museum of the Weird. Yeah, that's right. But there was also a walkthrough haunted house with a tour guide with a flashlight at one point, and there'd be all sorts of effects that happen. And that's where the backstory with the sea captain comes in, is that original walkthrough was the story. It was like Bloodmere Men or something like that. Blood something.
Yeah, I think Bloodmere was the one of them. And then there were so many names for that's another long Back to the Future.
Oh, we'll get there. We've done that one before, but we'll get there in video form, I'm sure. So here he's showing off some of Claude's miniatures. But we'll see some of those in the model as well. You'll see here the pirate ship, the Wicked Wench scene was a little different. They actually had someone walking the plank there. That would change. But the parts that Julie looks at through the little rings are pretty much what happened. Like there's the mayor scene. It's pretty much what it ended up being.
Nice camera work for a TV show, by the way.
Yeah, they weren't fooling around on this show.
Now, does this model exist somewhere?
Yeah, I believe it's still intact.
Do we ever see it on display anywhere? Have we ever?
I thought they rolled out a piece of it at D23 a couple years ago. I might be wrong. It definitely still exists. Yeah, and there's the auction scene. Auctioneer in a different spot. At that point, they were sort of on the other end of the scene. But again, the cool thing with the model was you could move the miniatures, so that's what they did. So they were able to just pick them up and move them and be like, oh, maybe this will look better over here. And this is the part where Walt tries to sell people on the fact that he has to send them back up a giant ramp at the end of the ride because they have to get you back to the entrance. Well, you're going to go up a waterfall because anything's possible at Disneyland and because, well, that's the only way we can get you back. You can see Mark Davis probably somewhere in the background being really angry about it. Mark was really unhappy about the ramp. There's Alice, actually. And there's Leota Toombs. Legends of Imagineering. She is putting some finishing touches. A lot of this was done just for the show. Some of these are probably not even the actual pieces.
No, I'm imagining these are some of the models.
Yeah.
These are some of Blaine Gibson's models.
Yeah.
I think the real ones were probably already in the show building.
Yeah, that redhead's very different from the finished product. There's a new Tomorrowland getting painted. Yeah.
It's so gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
Is that all the Pirates part? Can we jump ahead to the grand opening of Pirates? Is that on here, or are we watching the tent
figure
city?
out where it is?
It's a little further in the show. Oh, they're just putting a GE building down. Oh, there's some programming of animatronics. There's a dog barking. That's Wathel, I assume, with the dog. I can't see the face there. Oh, look at this. And look at this. In a 60s television show, they're showing you the characters without the skin or the clothing.
Yep.
So as much as Walt loves story, Walt also loved to give people behind-the-scenes look. Because Walt, I think, was just as fascinated with how they achieved things with as they were with the finished product.
And I think he also knew that giving them a little sense of this on television would make people want to come see the real thing.
And it sure as hell did. Again, when we talk about Florida, this one TV special plays a tremendous role in the history of Walt Disney World.
And I think it also shows us a shift. You know, the TV show was developed primarily to sell Disneyland. At this point, still was doing that job in a bit. You know, if you compare it to what we just went through with Pandora's promotion being spread across 4 different TV programs, it's a little
showing
bit
you nearly nothing.
It's showing you less than nothing. It actually kind of was the flip side in a way. It was, let's see how much we can boost ratings.
Look at the shot. Justin's talking, please. This is not how they transported them, by the way. This was done just for television. They owned trucks that were covered.
That's still amazing.
Yeah.
I choose to believe that children actually saw that driving down the road.
Not only did they see it, they were
out.
hanging out the window on the highway.
Hanging out the window.
No seatbelts, of course.
Yes.
But Justin, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. So, in some ways, Pandora was used to sell for TV shows this past week, as opposed to back then when a TV show was still trying to promote Disneyland.
Would they be eating beignets on the chew for a minute and a half?
Yeah.
So here we go. Look at that. So the entrance of Pirates, we're not going to really talk about it. Later on, they build a real queue for Pirates because otherwise that queue spilled out of that door every day. So what you walk in now where you go under that bridge and everything did not exist in 67. That was added later out of necessity because the line was just so insane. And there's the ambassador at the time in 68, 67, 68, taking guests into New Orleans Square. I can't hear what you say. Yeah, New Orleans Square looks pretty much the same, except for what people will tell you the things they did that for Club 33, which destroyed the land. Jason, probably jump a little forward here.
Nice big cigar there.
Should take us to the opening of the ride. A little more.
No, I think if
people there's a really terrible Captain Kirk and Mr. Smee. This might be it.
This is it.
Yeah, so here's what we talked about. Here are the Pirates going to board the Columbia, which is full of members of the invited press. Look at this. Oh, boy. This is spectacular. Look at all the press. They're all dressed up, taking pictures. This is the world's first bloggers on this boat.
And this is all on the Black Pearl DVD if people really want to watch this in depth, I believe. I don't know if the whole episode is or if it's edited.
I believe it's the whole episode. I might be wrong. Here the Pirates get... So they had a real fight, and these guys are just falling into the rivers of America.
Into the water.
This is an incredible event. So
you have to appreciate the big production they made out of the opening of the attraction.
And it was a terrible day. The weather was garbage. You'll see there the sky is not pretty. They even mention it in the TV special. They say the kind of day a ne'er-do-well would love. Not that I'm sure pirates liked rainy days, but it was their way of covering that. Yeah, the day we filmed this was really nasty outside.
It was one of the 3 days where it's not nice in California.
Here they are taking the women. So 1967, folks.
That would so not fly today.
Here's my favorite part. They get out these barrels. And, hey, media, who wants some rum? You're going to really like this ride after this. This guy's like, yeah, we did it. Oh, this guy smacking her in the behind with the sword.
Very Errol Flynn kind of pirates, though.
Yeah.
Which, again,
this is what people thought when you said pirates. Now, of course, even though these ladies were abducted, they're now very happy to be with the pirates on the ship partying. Oh, boy. Look at this. This poor media woman's getting it. And, of course, after that, look at these. There's 2 guards protecting the attraction. So the pirates guide the media to the opening of the ride. There's a huge fight. Eventually, the pirates will defeat these 2 guys.
Somehow swords beat guns.
Yeah.
Look at that amazing blue cement they've got there.
That pavement, yeah.
Nice.
That's the kind of colored pavement you find when Walt Disney World opened. Fantasyland was covered in that. Eventually, it was decided that doesn't hold up well, and concrete was used more.
The slightest bit of water, that's just going to be deadly.
Instead of just opening the door, let's just bash it in.
It's early Fast Pass.
You couldn't see it, but the FP Plus was on the front of that. And there goes the media into the ride. So that's the grand opening of Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland, that media opening on April 19th. And yeah, that's why they needed an exterior queue. And the special goes on to just show you the ride, but I assume you've all seen the attraction. So let's move on, shall we? Let's talk about Jason, actually, if you want to keep this up, we can, because we're actually just going to talk about the ride anyway at this point.
Sure.
So the ride begins, your adventure begins in the French Quarter of New Orleans, which stands proudly at the bend of the rivers of America. A manor house serves as the entrance to the attraction. Jason already talked about that at length. Once inside, guests are greeted by an improbable brick canal with a tropical sandbar, like you'll see inside of any building in New Orleans. And is strewn with treasure chests, a weathered Jolly Roger, and an unfurled treasure map. And as well, a green parrot greets guests, but that was added later after the success of the entrance at Walt Disney World. They decided at Disneyland they needed a Barker bird as well. So they added the parrot there. Guests then go into the Blue Bayou, which is where the attraction begins its adventure. And you can clearly see the side rails underneath the shallow water for your boat. The bayou is only 24 inches deep in this upper level of the attraction. Animatronic fireflies were added to the bayou for a touch of realism, and many California natives have never seen such creatures before and thought they were a Disney invention. That's right.
Wow.
Californians thought fireflies were an imaginary creature created for Pirates of the Caribbean. Anyway.
Wow.
Mark Davis recalled Yale Gracie as coming up with the original effect. In 1985, Tim Carter, who later went on to become a Disneyland cast member, came up with the superior design with more lifelike behavior. And his idea was accepted and utilized by Disney, and the effect updated at that time. So one of the few older effects updated, the moving fireflies in the bayou. Riders then board their boats at Lafitte's Landing and are at once afloat in the heart of Bayou country after a safety spiel is given by Blackbeard, because who knows safety better than Blackbeard? I believe Blackbeard tells him to put up tests 2, 5, and 7, in fact.
7?
Yes. Once past several rickety houseboats, the soft strumming of the banjo melodies, which at the time included Oh Susanna and Camptown Races, today it's just Oh Susanna, can be heard over the peaceful sounds of nature as guests pass by one of the houseboats on on a porch. There's an old man calmly rocking back and forth in his rocking chair. Lafitte's Landing is appropriately named for a real pirate who hid his headquarters in the Louisiana swamps. The French-born John Lafitte terrorized the Gulf of Mexico in the 1800s. He was notorious in New Orleans as a successful smuggler, yet he was able to hire the best lawyers to get an acquittal on the piracy charge. I believe the glove didn't fit. I think that's what happened. He served against the British under Andrew Jackson during the Battle of New Orleans. He then became a spy for the Spanish, who wanted to put a stop to the Caribbean piracy that was disrupting trade with America. His reputation grew during his years of smuggling in Barataria Bay and socializing in New Orleans. Lafitte spent much of his later years in Europe as a political philosopher. Many people from Galveston, Texas, still search for his buried treasure along the beaches of the Gulf of Mexico. There you go, a little real-life backstory for you folks. Crickets, frogs, toads, alligators, and all sorts of waterfowl hidden behind the mangroves sing their eerie song quietly throughout the swamp as you drift slowly towards the stone walls of a canal, which narrows into a brick channel that sweeps the small flat-bottom boat towards a dark corridor. From somewhere ahead, a steady low voice seems to be warning you of the adventures that may lie ahead. But for now, the gentle evening holds sway. The Blue Bayou is widely regarded as Disneyland's most effective outside-inside effect. And the Blue Bayou inspires many, many spin-offs over time. Walt Disney World, we got the San Angel Inn, which has at the time, the El Rio del Tiempo boat ride, now Grand Fiesta Tour, which goes slowly by the restaurant. But then many of the other pirate attractions, we'll talk about later, get Blue Bayou or Blue Bayou-esque restaurants. So, in fact, Walt Disney World, I think, is the only version that doesn't have a restaurant looking into the ride. So, go figure. So we tried to make up for it at Epcot, I Situated inside the 4-story high set, the flickering lighting of lamps and lanterns reflecting off the gently lapping waters creates a convincing outdoor experience. This is amplified by a queue design that gradually winds away from the natural sunlight, taking the guests through a simulated onset of the evening hours. As the boat continues floating onward, the mysterious voice continues droning on with a rather ominous message. Nick, do we have that the clip for everybody, the talking skull? Yeah. Better than me reading.
Avast there. It be too late to alter course, mateys, and there be plundering pirates lurking in every corner, waiting to board. Sit closer together and keep your ruddy hands inboard. That be the best way to repel boarders. And mark well me words, mateys. Dead men tell no tales.
Is there more to that?
Seeking adventure and solve your pirates, eh? Sure, you've come to the proper place. But keep a weather eye open, mates, and hold on tight. With both hands, if you please. There'll be squalls ahead, and Davy Jones waiting for them. Don't obey.
There you go. Exitencio delivering that wonderful performance of that talking skull, something sorely missing from the Walt Disney World version of the attraction. After turning a final corner in the brick channel, of course, guests find the owner of that voice. It's called the Jolly Roger, the talking skull. Mounted on the bricks above the boat's path, a plaque mounted with crossed swords and a talking skull asks the guests again to take heed of his warnings. After passing under the talking Jolly Roger, Pirates of the Caribbean visitors are rushed down 2 misty waterfalls, launching the ride into dark and mysterious grotto. Both drops are at a 21-degree angle, the first 52 feet in length, with the second 37 feet in length. I have a fun story. As they were developing the ride, there was too much of a splash. You see here the guests hitting the water. The splash was too much. People were getting wet, so they toned it down before opening so guests wouldn't get wet. Fun fact, people go down the drop and they're like, oh, we didn't get splashed. So they would go ahead and just stick their hands in and splash the people next to them anyway. So because people were doing this, they said, oh, I guess, because you got to remember this time, people dressed nicer to go to theme parks. They didn't think people wanted to get wet on a boat ride at Disneyland or in a theme park. So they decided, oh, I guess people do, so we can have a little splash effect. And that's why you get wet on Pirates of the Caribbean. It can be avoided. It is on purpose not being avoided.
Is that true for the New World version that can be avoided?
Well, I mean, the new boats are kind of at fault for that, but I mean, you get warned that you may get wet, so you're perfectly they're allowed to get you soaked. I get more wet on Frozen Ever After than anything else these days. So that's the one where you really get hit. But yeah, 2 drops at Disneyland because they got to get you through those 2 basement rooms that they built for the Wax Museum, and Walt just couldn't figure out another way. Walt said, just put some caves in. That's a quote. He couldn't figure out another scene to fill this part of the ride.
Just put Guardians in it.
It'll be fine.
So that's what happened there. The audio throughout the grotto portion of the attraction is quite important to the atmosphere. After successfully navigating the first waterfall, the joyous theme song Yo Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me plays briefly. Though the ominous stone walls of the caverns and the eerie moonlit scenery soon lend an air of mystery to the ride. The audio at this point matches and helps establish these changes in mood by changing to what might seem like more of a cinematic soundtrack, simplifying the theme to allow for sound effects to take the lead and adding to the guest's anticipation and or dread of things to come. After winding through the grotto for some time, visitors come across a grim scene. 3 skeletons that appear to have been seeking treasure in a small cove have reaped their reward. 2 have been run through with blades, and the remaining body lies dead next to the now empty treasure chest. All 3 apparently victims of another band of treacherous villains or victims of fighting amongst themselves. Originally, there was going to be narration here that explained what happened to them, but Disney, after seeing how the scene turned out, decided we don't need narration here. People can make up their minds for themselves what happened. And I think that's what works best in this scene. I think you riding through this grotto and all those scenes that come after silently sets the mood perfectly. There's no, you can make up the story for yourself, and I think that's one of the fun things about Pirates in Mansion is they do kind of give you the opportunity at moments to make up a little story in your head.
Actually giving guests credit for thinking for themselves.
Yeah, right? Instead of having to sing like, oh, you're here at Elsa's castle. We have to explain that now.
So I have to say, after years of riding the Pirates ride here at Walt Disney World, and I eventually, maybe 6-7 years ago, got to finally, got to finally ride the Disneyland version that I've been hearing so much about. And this beginning part, the grotto, it really set the stage in a way that the one here in Florida doesn't do as well. And
to drop.
Yeah, and this is what, right away, I knew that this ride was set apart from the Florida version, and that there was just something a little bit more special about this, because this whole ride through the grotto is what I like. My favorite part. This is my favorite part of the Disneyland version. And the fact that we get to do this is just so disappointing when you come back to the Orlando version and go on that, and it's just not as grand of a beginning.
We have the cliff notes, but we'll talk about why that happened. Talk about that a little later. But yeah, no, this does set the tone really, really well for the rest of the attraction. After winding through the grotto, we talked about that already. Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean attraction doesn't shy away from the fact that the legendary life of a pirate wasn't a placid existence, and that there was a price to be paid for such a vile lifestyle. In fact, the first set piece of the ride demonstrates this very clearly. However, the art and technology used in the attraction have propelled it into today's pop culture, stripping it of any of the real menace or threat that may have been drawn from these scenes. And maybe the theme song does really kind of help with that, but I think it was also another nice way to downplay some of the stuff that they would do later in the ride, maybe showing you that, yeah, these guys are eventually going to die for their sins, but, here's what they did before that. That guy drinking is my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, that makes its way into the films later, which is amazing. In issue 32, fall 1999 of the E-Ticket magazine, Jack and Leon Jansen published an extensive celebration of Pirates of the Caribbean. And the article notes some of the subtleties of the grotto scene. Quote, in the grotto, the first pirate skeletons are shown undisturbed where they lay. Further along, the skeletons are engaged in more lively pursuits like steering the ship or gulping rum at the bar. Deeper in the caves, the dead pirates seem as if still alive, reviewing treasure maps or fondling treasure. This shift from realistic to whimsical helps prepare the audience for adventures even more fantastic along in the attraction. These observations will prove true as we move further into the attraction. In many ways, the grotto scenes are modern results of the lives of the historical pirates that we will see further on. The clear message driven home in the attraction is that dead men tell no tales. Moving through the grotto, the crusty skeletons become more animated as noted above. We pass a skeleton at the helm of a shipwreck, the rotting board smashed on the rocky grotto of the shore, as we see through the rocky walls of the grotto out into the stormy night sky. Shredded sails and old cargo remains scattered throughout the site of the wreck as the lone skeleton captain is doomed to eternally pilot the ship to a long-forgotten destination. So it's easily arguable, this attraction, so well-known, such a big impact on pop culture. There are several scenes that can be considered the defining moment of the ride. The skeleton manning the ship is one of those, so much so that the original movie poster is just that. It's the pirate skeleton steering that ship's wheel. One of the most iconic scenes in theme park history. The opening portion of this grotto. Fun fact about it, apparently fake skeletons at the time were unconvincing. So real human remains were acquired from the UCLA Medical Center to furnish the ride. Later on, Imagineers decided to replace these with facsimiles and return the skeletons home to their countries of origin for a proper burial. I can't imagine why. It's one of the most ridiculous backstories I've ever heard. Real skeletal remains.
I don't think that's what people had in mind when they donated their bodies to science.
Eric, I think you're muted, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That would not fly today. That just,
No, it wouldn't.
There's no way you could ever greenlight that today.
You can't put pieces of real human beings in attractions. Yeah. Moving onward, guest pass.
If somebody would write that in their will, I want my remains donated to Disneyland to use in an attraction.
Well, you know, if you stick your hand out on Pirates of the Caribbean of Florida, you could probably leave at least a finger.
Oh, my.
I thought that's where you were going, Tom, when you talked about people sticking their hands in the water to splash each other. I thought
no, not even. I don't even have that story in this script. This script was long enough. I figured we've talked enough about the guy that lost his finger and the boats we had to receive after that. Moving onward, guests pass the cruise quarters, a salty hangout where two pirates appear to have died enjoying their rum. Don't drink, kids. Pirates seem to have once used this old inn as a homestead, and signs hanging nearby read, "Stow your weapons," and "There be no place like home." It's clearly a marked gag. Decorated with remnants from the old ships and vessels, the hideaway is adorned with liquor, glassware, and lush artwork. Adorning the area is original artwork by Mark Davis, and in fact, Davis's original painting was hung inside the attraction for years. It pictures a lusty redhead wielding a pirate's blade, drinking nectar supplied by a cherub with a devilish grin. Also, she's topless. Some believe this was foreshadowing of the redhead later in the attraction, but maybe it's just a coincidence. Who really knows? Drifting onward, the guests boat past the quarters of the captain himself, who is nothing more than a bony corpse propped up in his lush bed, studying a treasure map while his harpsichord plays a melancholy rendition of the ride's theme song. This is one of my favorite things, him holding this magnifying glass, and it just seems to be so perfectly aimed at his teeth, and they blow up real big when you pass by, and it's just such an ingenious effect. Like, even you'll see it in the video here. You'll see just the teeth blowing up. It's so cool. And it's really just a magnifying glass. Like, they lined it up and they made sure from the boat that that's the part you saw. Just really, really cool. Go ahead.
I was going to say that scene to me, more than anything, is the scene I remember as a kid. Even more than the skeleton at the wheel was this scene in the bed.
I could see that. I think the difference was not growing up with that in our ride here. Like that, I didn't have that to go with, but I could see growing up out there, I could see that being one of the things that sticks with you. It's a really, really neat scene. The guy on the treasure, too. I mean, the guy sitting on the pile of treasure is really iconic as well. Jason, if actually you could switch back, I have the art they sold, the redone Mark Davis art. If you switch back to me, the redone Mark Davis art they sold a couple years ago, maybe like last year. One of the cards is the guy sitting on the treasure. Back to the film. A man, a delicate taste, the captain, reads an old Disneyland souvenir guide. His quarters rigged with the finest furnishings money did not buy. And finally, leaving the captain behind, we come across the grand finale, the cursed treasure that every pirate dreams of. And, and that's from the Disneyland guidebook. Had that quote. I, blood money, and cursed it be. And indeed, the treasure cavern is filled edge to edge with sparkling jewels, piles of gold, and all types of trinkets and art. Seated atop the plundered wealth is that final skeptical pirate to remind guests that even the finest riches and wealth are no match for death, which is the only reward any of these pirates could ever count on. As the boat continues past the amazing treasure, the grotto narrows into a tunnel shrouded in a mist as ghostly voices echo through the cavern. Originally at this point, alligators attached to chains were going to snap at guests to urge them away from the gold, but then guests would pass a pirate salesman offering gold and other trinkets out of his open trench coat. I can't imagine why this didn't make the ride. Seems sort of out of timeline, definitely a Mark gag. Sometimes Mark would go a little too far, and I think Walt had to rope him back in. This was one of those times, again, a pirate dealer with a trench coat who'd open it up and try to sell you dead pirates' treasure. Only Mark Davis. He would get away with more of his more ridiculous gags in an attraction with singing bears. It probably fit Mark So then we move on. Escaping the eerie grotto, the boats find themselves thrust throughout a blinding mist into the smoky midst of a battle. Pirates aboard the ship, the Wicked Wench, are lobbing cannonballs across the lagoon at a Spanish fort, which is returning fire. Caught in the middle between splashing cannonballs and the innocent guests aboard their boats, proceeding heedlessly through the smoky melee. Of course, the captain would yell, "Strike your colors, you bloomin' cockroachers." Screams that the crazed captain would screech toward them. With each splash of each apparent cannonball, the water would glow orange as the red-hot projectile cooled and splashed water onto guests. So yeah, there you go. Wicked Wench, pretty iconic as well. Of course, there are no real projectiles. Each cannonball splashdown is actually created by, again, a flash of light mixed with an upward blast of air from underwater. This set is one of the most majestic large-scale scenes of the ride, but even so, it uses lighting and forced perspective to create the appearance of being even larger than it is. By creating a ship with top sails that are much smaller than they would be on the real ship, and as well a fortress with smaller upper levels, the effect of a larger scale is created. The village of Puerto Dorado on Isla Tesoro is overrun with pirates in search of treasure. Passing through the gates of the sacked town, guests see the first of a number of incredibly detailed scenes of mayhem. First, Carlos, the magistrate of the town, is seen being tortured by being dunked in the town well by a group of pirates asking for the location of the treasure. And he says, of course, "I will not talk." He replies bravely in his Spanish accent before being dunked again. A line of other town officials stand in line, bound as prisoners, perhaps waiting for their turn at being questioned. Fun fact, Carlos does not get dunked into water there. There's a splash effect, and his clothes always appear to be in a wet state, but there is no water that he's being dunked into. Because you can't really dunk a robot into a pool of water. Fun fact. Yep. The captives are being held at the gates of the mayor's home, which has been battered open and ransacked. His proud wife occasionally peeks out of an upstairs window, admonishing her husband with my favorite line of the attraction, "Don't tell him, Carlos, don't be chicken." And a pirate's pot shot at the window sill quickly causes the wife to duck back inside, but she'll peek back out again before long. Floating on the next scene, the guests come to is the ride's infamous auction scene, in which drunken pirates are encouraged to bid on local women. And a banner advises men to take a wench for a bride. In an interview with E-Ticket magazine, Imagineer Claude Coates recalls Walt's apprehension, the idea of the scene. Quote, "He came in one time and even said, this will be all right, won't it?" He was a little doubtful of auctioning off the girls. Was that quite Disney or not? Pirates will be pirates, though, so the scene was included. So some of the humor was added to the scene to give it a comic lift. While the auctioneer is trying to sell off one of the typical stout-hearted and corn-fed women of the town, the bidders cry out for the redhead, a flirtatious woman waiting in the wings for her turn to go to the highest bidder with apparent delight over it. The redhead, a wench who needs no cajoling to strut her wares for randy pirates. The scene is one of the most complex, with audio animatronic magic everywhere. The intricate auctioneer pirate moves and speaks with amazing realism, and the drunken bidders respond to him with merry glee. When one of them shoots his gun, props across the waterway respond as if they were hit by the shot, and audio animatronic chickens and goats respond with alarm. And of course, the dialogue pulls everything together. Yeah, I think it's still the coolest thing when that gunshot hits either the light post or the sign. It's really, really cool. And that goat screaming, which you just saw in the video.
We're looking on the screen here at the chickens and the goats and everything reacting in alarm, and it's amazing that they animated almost every single chicken within those crates.
Yeah,
they all have some movement. There's just so much work was put into that one little section.
And the woman consoling the one that maybe didn't get sold.
Yep.
Oh, it's such a great scene. So much storytelling, and again, that level of detail Walt talked about, where people will see something different every time. There is so much going on in each scene of this city that probably everyone in the boat is fixated on something different. There's a lot of different little sub-storylines happening there. Drifting onward, we see that many of the women of the town didn't take kindly to being sold off. Many of them have apparently escaped and are being chased through the town by their pirate suitors. And if this seems different to you at home, there's a reason. We'll get to it. But yeah, you're seeing it now in the original special. Those women, well, there's one woman chasing a pirate at the end for comedic effect, which I remember as a kid laughing, thinking that was hilarious. Because here you have at the beginning of that scene, all the men are chasing the women. But then in the end, there's this one woman who apparently the man was not enamored with and is chasing the man instead. It would pass surprisingly for 3 decades. One infamous part of the scene, it featured a pooped pirate reminiscing about the lively lassie he wished to hoist his colors upon. Holding her slip as he prattles on, the innocent victim peers out from inside an oak barrel behind the pirate's back as he keeps boasting, unaware. Yeah. So the idea is here, she's probably naked in the barrel.
Thanks for telling us that.
He's holding the negligee. Yeah.
I'm sure we all thought she had clothes on.
that.
He also at one point says he's willing to share. Willing to share, I be. I mean, I'm all for keeping Pirates of the Caribbean historically intact. But this was a little rough. That probably his dialogue more than anything. I think the men chasing the women was fine. I think the real problem is this.
Yeah, compared to this, right?
This idiot ruined it for everybody. Yeah. This guy who's willing to share the naked woman in the barrel probably caused some problems. Anyway.
So that's the real reason they changed it. They just didn't want to remind anybody it was even there.
Yeah, we'll get there. Nick, do you have that pooped pirate audio? I think this is the later audio, but we'll play it now anyway.
Little treasure, eh?
This is him talking about the woman.
Shy little wench.
Oh,
yeah, call that laugh.
It's good we can all laugh about it now. I wasn't sure if I sent you the food one or that one. I did send you the original. That's the original audio. Willing to share, I be. Oof, I thought we made off-color jokes on News Tonight. Moving on. As we drift further into the heart of the town, the pirates get more frantic and the mayhem gets more dangerous as the town is set ablaze. Meanwhile, the pirates have become too drunk to care as they sing the theme song blissfully and go about looting of the village, unaware of the threat that the flaming town has begun, singing with animals, trying to offer rum to cats, and putting their hairy leg over balconies. It's all the fun of that final scene of Pirates of the Caribbean. By the way, the TV special edited incorrectly here adds the second drop in the middle of the ride for some reason. Who knows why? But anyway.
The TV special also includes that Pirates line, "I'd be willing to share."
Yeah, again, at the time, it's 1967.
On the TV special.
People aren't offended so much, by that at that time. But 30 years later, it's a little different. Anyway. Let's talk about the flaming town scene, one of the most startling effects in the attraction. We talked about, of course, being tested in the mid-'60s. Some wary visitors even thought that the real flame was being used for the scene. Red-hot lighting effects, dancing shadows, flickering flames give the viewer pause. As the town burns brighter, the pirates grow dimmer as the alcohol takes its toll. Pirates stand around with their lit torches burning in their hands, unaware of their surroundings. Others wallow in the mud with pigs and stray cats. The guest boat drifts directly under a stone archway under the glazed gaze of a stupefied pirate with his pants ripped and his hairy legs sticking out, which Over the years, there's been a lot of argument if that's real human hair or not. Disney, in several cases, said it was, but I guess we'll never really know.
Well, donating your hair to a Disneyland attraction is certainly different than donating
You
your
can
skull.
be alive for that. That's actually video of me at the Paddlefish Media event. That's actually a lobster corn dog in my hand, not a torch. Anyway. And there is... I was going to say that's the metaphor for the new Hong Kong castle with a bunch of hats just stacked on top of each other. Anyway. But that show hasn't come out yet. Where are we here? Townbridge Writer, blah, blah, blah. Audio animatronic pirates are created with exaggerated features and facial expressions, you may have noticed, but they're still amazingly lifelike. The cartoonish features seem to be believable and appropriate amidst the extreme drunken behavior of the pirates. The following excerpt from Walt Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean Souvenir Guide explains, in the wet sculptor's clay modeling, they were first confronted with the problem of composing heads which were typical of real persons and not merely cartoon characters. Features were exaggerated to provide characteristics recognizable instantly and not to facilitate three-dimensional animation. Just as actors are chosen for roles in motion pictures, so also were the heads cast the figures. Dialogue, body size, and part in the show dictated which heads were to be used. So that picture earlier where you see Walt with all the heads, that's when Walt picked whose head was going to go where. Walt decided based on all the heads they had made who was going to be best for each role in the ride. The boats continuing through their trip through the melee, drifting into the foundations of the town and passing prison cells that are threatened by the looming flares and are captive pirates trapped inside, some of who are frantically trying to bribe the guard dog into bringing them keys to the cell, which he holds tauntingly in his jaws. Finally drifting into a...
That's where they got the idea for turkey legs. Aren't they feeding him like some bone or something?
There's a bone.
Yeah.
That's a turkey leg bone.
Good joke, Jason.
Thank you, Ashley, for laughing.
You're welcome.
Sympathy laugh. Anyway. Finally drifting into a burning building, guests are suddenly thrust into the midst of burning embers and flaming pillars. From above, ominous creaking sounds echo through the subterranean chamber as the foundations of the building above sway and burning beams crack and groan under the pressure. The boats then enter the town's underground arsenal and armory. Guests drift between stockpiles of weapons, cannonballs, and stacked barrels of gunpowder. The drunken pirates, oblivious to the imminent threat, as they take pot shots at guests in the boats, the casks of gunpowder on each other, while the shots ricochet off the walls and armor in the stocked room. With this final scene, guest tour of the world of pirates comes to an end, and before the inebriated salts can blow the arsenal to pieces, our boats make their escape up a waterfall. So here's another embellishment for TV. Nothing explodes in the ride. But clearly in this video, there's a huge explosion, and you go up a waterfall. So anyway, the up the waterfall effect needed to happen just to get the boats back to unload. Walt Disney World became a big sticking point if this was going to be in the ride or not. Mark Davis hated it. Mark Davis every day said it was the one thing about the ride he wished he could go back and change. There you go, and the boats return to New Orleans Square, the adventure concluding. There is the original 1967 Pirates of the Caribbean at Disney.
So did he hate it just because it took you out of the story?
Yes.
Because it was going up?
He thought it made no sense. He thought they'd crafted such an expert story that he hated that you just went up this giant ramp at the end.
I've honestly never thought about it that way. I just kind of
you could
accepted that that's the way it was.
Sit down.
You can always just get the people off the boat and then have them walk up the ramp.
Yeah.
Which we kind of did in Florida, but it's a much further way up to go at Disneyland. So, nice background. Get the jolly. You going forward to Disneyland Paris already? We're not.
No,
We're playing with the time machine again.
This is the next slide in the slideshow.
Oh.
This is Disneyland. This isn't Paris.
What do you mean that's Disneyland?
That's Skull Rock.
Oh, why do we have that?
Because it looks like it ties into pirates.
Wow, Jason, you're on fire.
I always thought returning going up the waterfall was part of the story.
Walt made it sound that way in the TV special,
Yeah,
but
I mean, it was just...
he was covering for the fact that they literally didn't have another way to do anything. They had no other way to get you out. You had to do it.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing in the attraction that says it's part of the story, I think is the problem.
Yeah.
Right. So, if somebody were to ask later, why did we go up the waterfall, I could say, oh, that's part of the story.
Because we went
down? But there's no way to
Anything's
know
possible at Disneyland was the answer to the question.
Yeah, I don't really think anybody worries about it at that point. Like you've had such a good time going through the whole ride and you realize the ride is pretty much over and then you got to get out. It's kind of like the story
you don't really give it that much thought.
Yeah, the story ends at that point anyway. So the going up the waterfall is, I never assumed it to be part of the storyline. I assumed it to be part of like the exit procedure.
I mean, is an up-traveling, time-traveling waterfall any weirder than a down-traveling, time-traveling waterfall?
It's slowly... The thing about the traveling into the ride is it's slow. Like, it builds to that. And then the talking skull, and then it kind of feels like a natural transition into the story. Going up the waterfall does not. Like, there's a bunch of people shooting at you, and then suddenly you go up a waterfall, and you're back in New Orleans.
It's your transition out. You just said going down is the transition in.
Yeah, but it's much more drawn out. Like you go through. No. Because going into the ride, you go through the bayou, and you go through the bricks, and you dive into caves, and you dive through more caves, and then you get to the battle, and the pirates are alive. As opposed to pirates are alive, and you go up a ramp, and pirates are dead again. I mean, I don't think it's the end of the world. It doesn't make Pirates at Disneyland any less great. It's just a weird thing that happens. So,
I mean, there are plenty of ride unloads though that don't necessarily, or ride endings that don't. I mean, even Pirates at Walt Disney World, suddenly there's a speed ramp to help
excuse me,
to help you up an incline.
Moving gangplank.
Also known as a speed ramp.
That makes more sense.
Your logos all over it.
Moving gangplank makes way more sense than a waterfall going up.
Moving Gangplank, sponsored by Goodyear. Just saying.
I think if they just added triangles to that ascent, it would have been perfect.
Create your own pirate ending.
Triangles instead of exploding barrels of gunpowder would have been perfect.
There you go. All right, well, let's talk about, we are WDW News Today. Let's talk about Walt Disney World, shall we? When the master planning of Walt Disney World kicked into high gear in late 1967, after the death of Walt Disney and securing the vital legislation from Florida State Senate, the company had no intention of building Pirates of the Caribbean for their new Ventures theme park component. They believed the pirate lore was too close to Florida's history to warrant such an attraction at the Magic Kingdom. The prevailing sentiment was that southeastern U.S. audiences would prefer to be entertained by a taste of something less familiar and more removed from their geographic region.
So my question is, that makes sense on the surface. My question is, how many of those initial guests at Walt Disney World were from somewhere outside of the southeastern U.S.?
That's true.
Right?
Well,
like those are probably the ones that went and complained.
I mean, the thing is, you got to remember with Disneyland, they had a mostly local audience.
Right.
But they did have people from around the world, but they knew a majority of their people were local. I'm sure in planning Walt Disney World, they kind of thought along those lines too. Like, yeah, it'll mostly draw people from Florida, but then
right. And I think that didn't happen quite the way they figured. So my guess is that a lot of the people that complained, probably the locals maybe didn't complain. It was all the people that were non-locals that complained, and it just seemed like a lot of people.
Hold on, we'll get there.
Well, it's possible. I mean, but I think a part that they missed too, people from the Southeast, they have a deep love for their history and culture. And so,
you ever seen Confederate flags flying around?
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, Tom made the off-color joke tonight.
But I mean, even in that, like, I think they took too seriously that people in Florida wouldn't want to see pirates because there was pirate history in Florida. People from the South, we enjoy seeing our history and things like, and that ties to the culture and everything being represented. And so I think the locals may have been some of the ones to go and complain too, because they knew that pirates were part of their history and culture, and they wanted to see it. They saw the special, they'd heard about it in California. Why can't we have it too?
I just don't think that pirates were that big of their history.
I don't think so either,
absolutely
David.
not.
I agree with you because
Hold on, before we get too far into this, I have a little more about.
Go ahead, read those next two
Yeah,
paragraphs.
go ahead.
That development, and then we'll get right back into this. I'll let you guys.
Before you do that, Tom, let's just note for the record that they didn't pay attention to this concept when they built California Adventure.
It was the opposite.
Where they knew there would be locals, yes.
So meanwhile, a giant expansion pad lay dormant in Frontierland for what would be known as the replacement, what would be the replacement for Pirates of the Caribbean in Florida. A Western boat ride known as the Western River Expedition was planned as a late Phase 1 project. Jason, let's put up that depressing piece of artwork of what could have been. Because God knows Disney World fans haven't seen this piece enough. There it is. And rest assured, folks, someday. We have done a Back to the Future, the Big Thunder Mountain Back to the Future. There's a full ride through, and we talk a whole lot about Western River Expedition. Someday we'll have to do a video one as well, but it's really fascinating. We're not going to get too much into it this time. We're already 2 hours in, folks. It was in the midst of this work that Walt Disney World opened to the enthusiastic crowds in October 1971. Many Walt Disney World visitors fully expected to enjoy Pirates of the Caribbean from Disneyland, which they had heard so much about and seen promoted on Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color, the company's Sunday night television show. When these people arrived in the Magic Kingdom to find nary a buccaneer, there were, to put it mildly, a few complaints. They bombarded guest relations, they wrote letters, they even called Burbank. Where were the Pirates of the Caribbean? So now there was a problem. While Imagineering still felt the River Expedition and promoting it on its considerable merits was an appropriate route, there was no doubt that this would be a more costly and more risky option than simply repeating Pirates, especially when Pirates was a surefire success with great word of mouth. That's certainly how Walt Disney Productions management saw it, specifically all-around beloved guy Card Walker. He insisted that Pirates be added to Florida's park post-haste, which it was in an abbreviated form built for a rumored half of Western River's projected $60 million price tag. All right, folks.
But that's because it had half of the attractions.
Yeah, go ahead, have at it.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I think I'm the only one who grew up in South Florida, and we didn't learn about pirates as part of our culture. That we learned a lot about the Spanish, colonization and stuff like that, like in the Atocha being like the treasure ship. I remember growing up knowing about the one that's off the coast of Key West, but like pirates weren't.
Well, no, maybe not. Okay, so maybe not Florida, but the South and you learn about them, especially even like South Carolina, North Carolina, Topsail Island, and all those little islands and inlets and channels where the pirates used to hide. I mean, it's not a big part of the culture, but it is something that people know about and they hear about. So I'm just saying, I think the argument that people didn't want to see it was a little silly. Clearly. Because it was, and it is. I mean, people know that pirates were in the area. They were everywhere. Not
we
just
could
in
have had.
Florida. We could have had something
this.
better. I'm not arguing against that. I'm just pointing out that the argument in the first place to not put them in was flawed. We could have had both.
Look at this. Look at that. Oh, it's sad, but it's pirates. I mean, I couldn't imagine. Could you imagine those of us who grew up with Walt Disney World not having Pirates of the Caribbean in your life?
I could certainly see, I could very much understand the point of view of all those people that complained, where are the pirates?
But we wouldn't be here right now if they decided, forget it. Would there even be a Pirates of the Caribbean film series? Would it be well known enough based on that one attraction at Disneyland? Would Pirates of the Caribbean be the pop culture phenomenon that it is if it only exists at Disneyland?
Absolutely. To this day, it is one of my 3 favorite attractions in Walt Disney World. I feel that ride, with the exception of maybe the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, it has the most re-rideability of any attraction in Walt Disney World. And I can't imagine, no matter how fantastic concept art of something else may be, I can't imagine Walt Disney World not having Pirates of the Caribbean. I just can't.
Yeah, I think for me, having grown up on the East Coast and going to Walt Disney World, I would not have ever seen Pirates of the Caribbean until I was 20 something, almost 30. So it certainly, it certainly wouldn't have been a big deal at all to me that there was a film series coming out about this attraction or anything like that.
But anyway, the decision to build Pirates was made in early 1972, at which time the future of Thunder Mesa and the Western River Expedition was immediately up in the air. Pirates on its way to the park, the urgency to build another major attraction on the west side, especially with Tom Sawyer Island open in 1973, was massively diminished. If the key component of Thunder Mesa hadn't been a boat ride placed so close to Pirates, there may have still been a compelling argument to proceed. There were still various peripheral attractions like the train ride and the mules to consider, but in the eyes of management, there was enough factors to just table the project in its entirety. With no New Orleans Square, a vacant plot in Adventureland was chosen for the project. This wouldn't be just the addition of a new ride; it would add shopping, entertainment, and dining as well to create a subland of sorts. The land would also complete the dead end at Adventureland, leading less traffic between the small corridor between the Country Bear Jamboree and the Sunshine Tree Terrace. The new area would be called Caribbean Plaza. So why don't you imagine that tiny ramp, which in no way handles guests now, even though it's not a main artery, between Frontierland and Adventureland near the Country Bear Jamboree. That was the only passage over there from Frontierland and Adventureland. It was always bottlenecked. So this was something that not only was going to add capacity and bring Pirates in, but finish off that corner, which they kind of desperately needed.
Well, you also have to realize, though, that there weren't 700 strollers parked there back in 1973. So the
Only
bottleneck...
100.
What's that?
Only 100.
Yeah, so the bottleneck wasn't nearly as bad as it is today.
Yeah, but it was still just that ramp there. It wasn't much of anything.
No, I know it wasn't a lot, but...
Where did Frontierland end at the time?
Pecos Bills. The front facade.
It went all the way to end of Pecos?
Yeah, that front facade of Pecos.
Well, the Frontierland Railroad Station was there.
Well, I mean that corner, but it would go across there. But yeah, you could walk down the train station, but you couldn't turn the corner at Pecos.
Right. So you had Pecos and the train station, and that was it. That was pretty much a dead end at that point too.
The canoe docks would have been over there too, wouldn't they?
I think so.
The canoe docks were over near Haunted Mansion.
No, that was Mike.
That was Mike Fink.
Oh, okay.
I think they were
moved a few times. I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't even be able to tell you where they were in '71, but they moved a couple times.
But the rafts at Tom Sawyer Island, the raft landing was over there too.
Not yet.
No, but when it opened,
'73, which
right.
Pirates opened already by then. So
right.
Yeah.
So weird to think of it with there's 3 tickets along that corridor in the back, and there were none of them
on opening day. Then none of that existed. Well, of course, those other 2 tickets we're not talking about in this segment replaced Western River. They're in the plot. So there you go. The land would include a more intricately themed facade and queue for Pirates of the Caribbean, themed to a fort, El Castillo del Moro, 2 large show buildings connecting under the Walt Disney World Railroad, a shopping plaza and restrooms at the attraction's exit, an arch for the passage between Adventureland and Frontierland, an undercover market area, which would eventually become more restaurant seating many years later, an extension of the facades near Pecos Bills, and a new restaurant called El Pirata y El Perico. Mark Davis wished to correct what he saw as the problems with the ride on the West Coast, borrowing from some things he intended for his Western River Expedition ride. Since he wasn't getting to do it, he's like, fine, I'll just do some of this for Pirates, I guess. In a rush to please the Orlando guests, many of these things were cut for time and budget anyway. Jason, we have that Mark Davis picture. It's him drawing the finale for Florida, actually.
Yeah, I will get back to that. That was way early, but I'll find it.
Yeah. One concession made was a completely new finale. The treasure room would be made the finale of the ride. Otherwise, the middle of the ride's layout would remain mostly the same as California. The beginning and ending were reworked, removing several scenes and shortening the attraction. Mark didn't get to add everything he wanted. One addition that he lost was a pirate who would turn into a skeleton. This wouldn't be realized until the Shanghai Disneyland version of the ride in 2016, when Jack Sparrow would do it in that ride. It also became an interesting part of the premise for the later film series. So there you go, the Florida ride playing a big role, even though some of it never saw the light of day.
So there's Mark Davis.
Let's pull that up. There we go. So there's Mark, and that is the original artwork he's painting for the unique finale scene in Florida, which we used to have. It's gone now. With no need for 2 drops, only one was installed. They had guests exit before the ramp that returns the boats upstairs to the load area, leaving them not to have to explain to you why it travels up a waterfall.
See, so that was Mark's idea.
Yeah, it was. That's why Mark hated that going up the waterfall. So he said, we're not doing it in Florida. Forget it.
Why were there 2 large show buildings connected under the Walt Disney World Railroad?
Well, the show building at the top, and then it goes under the railroad, and the second building is out there. It's like Disney.
Oh, so there's 2 show buildings that are not.
Yeah, they're not two of them behind the railroad.
Okay,
yeah.
That's what I was reading. That's what I was reading differently. Okay.
Construction began in September of 1972. Ground was cleared, foundations poured, and backstage roads and bridges rerouted and rebuilt. The Walt Disney World Railroad will also be rerouted not even 1 year into its existence. The utilidors were not expanded for the project, and it was built at normal ground level, which is why you descend downhill into Adventureland from the pathway alongside Pecos Bills. The queue would feature 2 lines with completely different set pieces leading to 2 different load platforms, helping with the overall ride capacity. In one area, a set of skeletons were left in an eternal chess battle, stalemate. When the attraction was remodeled in the 1990s, Imagineers swept the board clean, but then couldn't figure out how to put the pieces back. Luckily, Mark Davis made a diagram, which they found and were able to use to fix it. The Florida attraction would move directly into the caves in Dead Man's Grotto / Hurricane Lagoon, then dropping you down 1 13-foot drop into the bombardment scene. You would then travel through the town almost identical to that found at Disneyland. And once passing through the jail scene, the burning timber scene, and the room of drunken pirates shooting explosives were replaced with the Florida exclusive treasure room. In the room, 2 guards were tied up while the pirates pillaged and their parrot sang. Guests would then unload at the lower level and take the moving gangplank, Justin Heyman, or Goodyear speed ramp up to Caribbean Plaza. The Florida ride has 133 audio animatronics, some of which didn't even arrive in Orlando until 3 weeks before the ride opened. The ride is 8.5 minutes long, provided boats do not back up. There is also 1,140 feet of track, and the boats travel roughly 2 feet per second. There's 155,000 gallons of water in the ride, with an average depth of 29 inches. Each boat can hold up to 23 guests in 5 rows of 4 and a rear row with 3. They can load roughly 2,063 guests with single load, and if they're doing double load, they could do 2,750 an hour if the circumstances are correct. Ron, does that sound about right? Did you guys ever talk about numbers when you worked there?
ROHRC, I think there was 3,200 actually, is what they were saying. Yeah.
This is apparently according to the opening. At opening, this is what they thought they could do.
Yeah, and OHRC is what they think they can get, not what they could theoretically get.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're running both sides, there was nothing on hand. And I mean, even talking about what could go through percentage of the park, it was the highest percentage. I think it was even before they added depth and stuff. It was something like 80% of all guests in the Magic Kingdom went through there on a daily basis.
The other thing worth mentioning, this is 2 separate tracks for load at this point in 73. The left side and the right side were 2 separate channels that then funneled into one. This eventually changes. We'll talk about that. That's why, in case you were listening before, you might have been saying, like, that doesn't sound like what it is. Changes later on. The attraction opened on December 15th, 1973. Who do you think would open this attraction? Who would make sense to open the Pirates of the Caribbean? Who would you invite?
Bob Hope.
Maybe. That might be a good one. Who else? Who else do you think you might invite to opening of a
Errol Flynn.
Errol Flynn? Yeah, that one makes sense. How about Christie and Rock Hudson?
Of course.
Because that's who they did invite. What does it have to do with anything? It's like, hey, who can we get? Rock Hudson and his wife are available. Well, let's get them. Yeah, anyway. The 70s are a weird, deranged time in pop culture. Guests on the Florida attraction are also greeted by Peg Leg Pete. Hey, Pete! Yay! This is Peg Leg Pete, in case you didn't know. Peg Leg Pete was an audio animatronic bird with a pirate hat, an eye patch, and a wooden leg, and a tattoo of an anchor on his chest. And he would sing "Yo-ho, yo-ho, a parrot's life for me." And he was the best. Wasn't he the best? I miss him so much. I think it needs to come back. There needs to be a future refurb where they just reinstall it.
I agree.
It was such, I know it was kind of cartoony, but it was just such an endearing thing. And he was such a great merchandising piece. Even in my room back in New York, still hanging to this day, they made a big plush of him on a perch. And it's still hanging up on my window. It's you're not going to sell more merchandise or anything else. That's why even though he's not in the ride anymore, they made this plush and they sell tons of. He's a Tsum Tsum. He's not even in the ride.
And we now know they can make really good audio animatronic parrots these days. We just saw one.
That's true. He did come back for a brief moment. I don't have it in the script here. They did a pirate premiere, ticketed event thing for one of the movies, and WDI rigged him up as a living character where they talked through him. And it was used the one night of the event, and then it vanished again. So WDI still has him. Peg Leg Pete is alive and well. Will he ever reemerge? We'll have to wait and see, but I certainly hope the merchandise sales. The Orange Bird had good enough merchandise sales to come back. I think we can get Peg Leg Pete back, right? Anyway. You tell him bitter about the Orange Bird?
Maybe a little.
Wrong bird.
Yes, this is the bird that needs to come back. Peg Leg Pete. Even though the ride opened in December 1973, the shops in Caribbean Plaza were not fully opened until May of 74. The original shops included the House of Treasure, the Plaza del Sol Caribe, La Princesa de Cristal. There's still a crystal shop there. It's amazing it's lasted all these years. Jason's showing the current facade after the modifications. The Golden Galleon, and of course, El Pirata y El Perico. Caribbean Arcade also opened later in 1974. Of course, all that would change over and over again over the years. At one point in time, they had a photo studio where you and your family could dress up as pirates and take a picture. And it was really, really neat. I tried to get my mother to scan the one I have at home today.
I was going to say, when was that there? Because I think I remember
late
that.
80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
We have a family picture, and I love it so much. Living Seas had something similar, too. You see things where they Photoshop you into a background, which they still do in some locations. But back then, they actually used to put you in front of a screen, and they used to dress you up, too. You'd put on costumes.
Real clothes, yeah.
They put me in a barrel. They dressed me up, and they literally put me in a barrel, and I'm popping out of a barrel holding a cannon.
Oh, it's great.
They had one of those for the Walt Disney World Railroad, too.
Did they really?
Yeah, because my wife has a picture of it with her parents when she was little.
That's cool.
It looks
those
like
were
you're
a
on
big
the back
thing when
of
I was a
the
kid.
caboose.
Now we have Snapchat filters. Same thing.
Yeah. Never mind. I'm not going to make the joke. Same thing, different name. Let's move on. So we've covered Florida. Florida opens. Then, the 70s were not a great time of the Walt Disney Company. During this period, though, Tokyo Disneyland became a reality. The first international Disney resort would open on April 15th, 1983. To make the project a reality, Imagineer Marty Sklar brought with him legends such as John Hench, Ken Anderson, Herbie Ryman, Mark Davis, Claude Coates, Blaine Gibson, Sam McKim, and Ex Atencio, but new recruits would include Randy Bright, Eric Jacobson, Michael Sprout, John Horney, Bob Weiss, and Chris Teets. For Adventureland in Tokyo, a French Quarter section was created to host the Pirates of the Caribbean and a second Blue Bayou restaurant. The ride would mostly be the Disneyland version with only one drop and the removal of the captain's quarters from the cave scene for spatial reasons. But otherwise, they said, forget the Florida version. They built the Disneyland facade. They built the Disneyland ride with one drop, and they built the Blue Bayou. And it's like 10 years later, they decided we're not going to do it. The reasoning they gave was they thought a New Orleans section was far more exotic to the people of Japan and could offer some really fun delicacies food-wise and architecture-wise, some different things to look at that they would have never seen before. So they thought it was a really great idea to do New Orleans again. although not being its own land, it's part of Adventureland there. But they did New Orleans again, and there's the facade, the recent version with the movie editions. But that's the facade at Disneyland. All right, so we move forward. We're going through time to 1991 and the first modifications to the Walt Disney World attraction. Safety concerns prompted Walt Disney World to remove their twin load stations. Guests would too often stick their hands out, and the underwater switch that would send boats into the channel could easily lop that off. A single load channel was built, but it would continue to load from two separate queues and two sides. So that's what you know today, where they load from both sides. But originally it was two channels, and they funneled into one. But eventually the single load with the two stations where they load people into the boat.
So that's how Small World at Disneyland does it still, right?
Yes. No, Disneyland has the split. Disneyland has the split outside.
Right.
They merge.
That's what I'm saying. Two separate channels.
Yes. So what used to exist at Walt Disney World is still what Disneyland Small World has. But what's interesting is this change basically makes the load more like the Disneyland version, although you're loading guests from two sides in this case.
You're still loading two boats at once.
You are, but Disneyland does that too. They have an elongated...
Right, they load two boats at once from the same side. Mm-hmm.
I could see how that actually upped the capacity because you don't have to deal with the track switching that you would need to from the two channels.
It supposedly was a negligible change. They said they do about the same capacity.
Right, I imagine it's pretty close, but I imagine also that the maintenance and issues with the switch were eliminated, so that probably reduced downtime.
Yeah, I mean, the Small World switch is still, I think, a lot of the reason why they go down at Disneyland.
Yeah, so I'm sure getting rid of the switch track there was a benefit.
I know even the switch where the boats go into the storage section is still one of the places it breaks down the most, even during the middle of the ride. During the day, that's one of the that's where I know like we've had issues where we've had to run evacs because it broke down there, and that's also the spot where I always heard the rumor where George came from.
You want to talk about George? We didn't talk about George.
Sure. I think most of our audience is going to know the rumor of the ghost who haunts the pirates is George. You know, people have always said it's part of the like. It's been the rumor for years, but I was never actually trained at Pirates. I worked there for a couple months while we had too many CPs before Magic Carpets opened. They loaded enough staff there for it to be open, but they needed to get rid of us for a couple months. So I worked like basically greeter in front of Pirates for probably about 2 months straight. So I would, be there for the opening and closing procedure some days. And they do actually do the good morning and good night, George, whether it's part of the official training or not. But everybody told me it's not in the books, but every trainer tells you have to do it or you're going to break down. And the story I got was a maintenance worker was pinned between two boats at the storage area section. Other ones I've heard years later were, somebody painting something high fell, but there's nothing official about it. I've never heard anyone who's seen anything there, but it is definitely something that's said over the intercom every morning and every night.
Yeah. And if they break down, they always blame it on him, no?
If they blame it on someone not greeting him properly in the morning.
Oh, George. By the way, no one died in Pirates of the Caribbean, though. It's often argued if someone ever died in there.
Yeah, I've never found any record. I've never heard of any record. But people believe the superstition, even if they don't believe in the ghost.
Yeah. I know. I don't know if it was you that was telling me. I've heard it from several people that worked at that ride. They do not like to walk in the maintenance area between the lift hill, essentially, that you don't get to see because you don't ride back up the waterfall. A lot of people said they do not like to spend time in there. They're really creeped out by it.
I've never heard that. The one I always heard was the old Kong ride about the ghost in there. People wouldn't take empty carts around.
Confrontation was haunted?
Yeah, I don't know if we want to get into that now, but
No, let's not. We're already 2.5 hours into this.
I'll tell you when we're off the air.
That sounds good. Maybe that's the one that shows up at the end of The Mummy and takes his coffee.
Very close, actually, to what happens.
Yeah, that storyline kind of talks about a curse and everything. It's weird. Art imitating life. All right, let's move on. It was decided in designing Euro Disney that Pirates of the Caribbean would be included to open with the park. The plan was to take what existed, put it in a new order, and add new scenes and effects to tell the best story possible, fixing any and all issues with the three versions of the ride that existed. Construction began in 1989. The ride was ready for opening day, April 12, 1992. The ride system was built by Intamin. A winding exterior queue leads guests into Eternal Nighttime Harbor, complete with the Blue Lagoon restaurant. The ride here begins with guests sailing through a long-abandoned pirate galleon filled with creatures now overrunning. Skirting the coast, boats sail with views of a moonlit ocean as they approach a lift hill. Oh, wait, Ron's got pictures here. We're going to switch to Ron. There we go. Now we're in Paris. Bonjour. Skirting the coast, the boats sail with a view of a moonlit ocean as they approach a lift hill. The hill appears to be some sort of a lift device with a winch spinning in perpetuity to complete the effect. Flowing through the fort, guests can see the attack scene they're about to careen into before it happens. Pirates are scaling the wall, and there's even a swinging pirate above guests attacking the fort. Here, guests also float through the jail scene very early on in the ride and go down the first drop into the battle. This includes the Wicked Wench firing upon guests and across the ride path, something that doesn't happen in the other versions. The town portion of the ride is mostly the same, but with the latest in audio animatronics technology for the time. There's also one of the greatest innovations in AAs to date. There was a set of audio animatronics who had a sword fight. As well, at the end of the town, guests entered the arsenal, and the explosion there sends them down a second drop. It makes sense. This leads to a few scenes of skeletal remains of the pirates, showing what will become of all of them for their wicked lives. The Disneyland Railroad passes through this scene, something not present in any other version of the ride. You get to look in. This is considered before Shanghai, but Shanghai's a whole different pirate ride. This is considered the perfected version, the best version of the original Pirates of the Caribbean that was ever built. We have a couple of you that have been to Paris and seen this. What do you think about it?
I would agree with that. Absolutely.
Ron, you obviously... Whoa. I'm going to switch off of Ron's screen. Thanks, George. It's because you didn't greet George this morning. Ron, you're muted.
Yeah, I really liked it. I still think I like the California ride better, but I think the whole, like, because it's just so weird, like, you go up first in Pirates before you go down, or in Paris. But there are some great scenes. But I think overall the experience is still better in California, but there's just some really cool stuff there. And maybe it was not as many French people taking flash photos constantly on the ride.
They were busy with their cigarette.
So I'll say neither restaurant was much better, but I happen to like Blue Lagoon. I think a lot more than a lot of people said they did. I thought it was a decent meal. As I know a lot of people say it's one of the worst there, but like I've never had Barracuda before, so I can't compare it to what I had there because it's the only place I've had it.
No Diamond Horseshoe. I
actually kind of like their bayou area because it's narrower and kind of winding looking as opposed to the big open space.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very cool part of it. And yeah, the animatronics blow anything in the domestic parks out of the water. Definitely the dueling pirates were incredible to see. I heard about them and they lived up to the kind of hype I heard.
The one thing I'll say about the story is that I think I prefer California's version out of all of them because of those early scenes and including the captain's quarters. I really think they overthought it when they did Florida and Tokyo and even Paris to some extent. While still showing them, I like having those scenes up front because it really sets the mood and the tone and and really emphasizes the fleeting nature of a pirate's life before you get into all of it. So by setting that scene first, I feel that it becomes a little bit more dark of a story, and I like that about the California version.
Yeah, I thought I really liked the Paris version. I thought that the whole going uphill and then through the castle fort was really well done, and of course the effects are much better than any domestic version. So I thought it was great. There's something to be said for Disneyland being the original. Which that's a valid point too. So it's hard to say, but I really did like the Paris version. It's one of the better attractions at Disneyland Paris. Where it doesn't always have the better versions of things,
or things,
or good versions of things for that matter.
It's almost like their Space Mountain. It's almost so different. It's hard to compare.
Jason hated their Space Mountain.
I don't like their Space Mountain.
Well, now neither does anyone who lives out there because it's hyperspace mountain.
Yeah.
Anyway. Oh, Paris. Don't worry, we'll own you soon. Move on. Let's move on to 1996. Refurbishment on both coasts, the Disneyland and Walt Disney World versions, came about in late 1996 and carried into 1997 for the 30th anniversary of the attraction. Fun fact, back then, kids, they didn't tell you things were going down for refurbishment. So I'm there. We're there that week, and we're walking around like last day of the trip. We rode Pirates early in the trip. It was all right. We get to Pirates, and it's just walled off. I remember like, oh, I guess Pirates is closed now. So anyway, the main focus of this refurb would be to remove the scenes with pirates chasing women, as it might have been deemed offensive. That being said, a lot of other really big changes were made. At Disneyland, that famous plaque that now greets guests outside of the attraction was added. It marked the 30th anniversary. If you go read it, that's why it was added. It's a 30th anniversary plaque. Though the setting is the same, the scene in question was altered to feature the pooped pirate reminiscing about the culinary wonders of the town, as hunger seems to have taken the place of a lusty libido in these pirates' minds. Rather than a frightened maiden peeking out of the barrel, an alley cat would peek out, trying to steal a meal off of the gluttonous pirate's platter. A horse and a goat also tried to rob him. Why all these animals? Because they were in the world of motion at Epcot Center. After the ride closed, a number of these figures and others were sent to WDI to be repurposed into various attractions. All those added to Pirates of the Caribbean were removed in the 2006 overall. Disneyland got all those figures. We did not do that at Disney World. We just simply made some alterations, but it was still food related. At the Magic Kingdom, the chase scene was altered to show the pirates making off with various treasure as they formerly chased women attempting to thwart them. The poop pirate here, actually, no, I'm sorry. Ours was, he had a treasure map and he was looking for the treasure. Here he said, the map says X marks the spot, but I be seeing no X's for me. The woman in the barrel remains, though this time she's hiding a small treasure chest in the barrel with her. Makes sense, I guess. At Disneyland Paris, these changes have not been made. Do you know why? Because it's Paris.
Because no one over there cares.
No one there cared. No one cared. These modifications garnered a lot of criticism from longtime fans and got a lot of media publicity. In Jason Sorrell's book, Pirates of the Caribbean, From the Magic Kingdom to the Movie, show writer Francis Xavier Tencio referred to these softening touches as the Boy Scouts of the Caribbean. I remember this change vividly. I don't remember being upset by it because I don't think as a kid I really understood what was going on prior anyway. I was still pretty young. But I remember it closing for these changes, and when it reopening, I remember people screaming about it.
Do you think they received any complaints, or do you think that they just changed it as a preemptive because somebody pointed it out to them?
At least one.
Really?
I always heard the story that Eisner personally got a very long, detailed letter complaining about it is what prompted it. I don't know how apocryphal that is, but that's the story I always remember. And this is even like, this was back in 96. Because I remember this was the birth of the fanboy, I think, was when this happened. Because I remember.
This is the moment. Well, 96 has to be the birth because the first Epcot Center opening day ride closes and Pirates gets changed. So, yeah.
Well, there you go. That.
But like even on the old message boards, I used to go like the old hidden Mickeys like list, but not the like one that's out there now. This was just like user submitted like threads of hidden Mickeys. There were discussion boards, and this was one of the first ones I really remember. This led into the Save Toad, I think. And that was the whole
Toad ends.
Yeah. So that was the whole beginning of it. So this was chatted about on the early internet.
Yeah, it happened. Is anyone super opposed to it? Anyone think like it shouldn't have been done?
I think it was silly, but I mean, I don't think it hurts anything either way, personally. I wish they would have left it the way it was, but doesn't really make that much of a difference.
Yeah,
I mean,
I can certainly see why Exitencio was kind of annoyed because the women chasing the pirates doesn't really fit the storyline immediately after the women were auctioned.
Yeah.
If it was somewhere else in the ride, that would make a bit more sense. But having the women auctioned and then chasing the pirates doesn't make any sense where it is.
Yeah. And I always love that gag with the one woman at the end chasing the guy. I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, you lose that.
Yeah.
joke.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember a little bit of the uproar about it, but most of it was not necessarily that it hurt the attraction. It was just pushback against being overly politically correct.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is an argument we're still having, but that was the argument that I remember hearing at the time. Personally, I could go either way. I do miss some of the jokes that set up, but I also can understand why they wanted to change it.
Yeah, I mean it's a fairly touchy subject. Is it something that historically happened? Yes. Is it something the kids need to see? Maybe not. So.
But like you said, the kids really don't understand.
Yeah.
In most instances, what's actually going on.
The kids don't need to understand why you would bid on your wife at an auction either.
Right. Yeah.
But that's still there.
Well, now,
to me, that's the worst part of it.
They still want the redhead.
Yeah. Well, they can't touch the auction scene. The auction scene is not.
Oh, there will
touched.
be riots.
Yeah. No, we will chain ourselves to the auction scene. It will not happen. It will not happen. But yeah, that's the 1997 redo. They also redid all the lighting. They redid a lot of figures, whole new sound system. It was a major overhaul top to bottom. And California added a lot of weird stuff too. There's a lot of extra pirates added in a lot of places. 2 figures from World of Motion were redressed as pirates and were carrying a treasure chest up the lift hill at the end in an attempt to make the lift hill a scene. So, thanks, World of Motion.
Triangles were otherwise taken.
Yes, by other Epcot attractions. Those will get recycled to the Pirates finale eventually. In 2000, we're going to move on to our story. In 2000, a spin-off attraction for Pirates of the Caribbean was created. It's called Pirates of the Caribbean 2, The Battle for Buccaneer Gold. It opened at Disney Quest. Look it up, kids. Florida's Walt Disney World Resort. On this attraction, up to 5 players board a virtual pirate ship to sail around a small 3D world. Players may fire cannons at other virtual ships, and if opposing ships are sunk, their treasure will be stolen. Disney Quest, I'm going to read you a little bit of the press release. Disney Quest today unveiled 2 new attractions at the indoor interactive theme park of Walt Disney World Resort. Inspired by one of the most popular and beloved Disney theme park attractions of all time, Pirates of the Caribbean, Battle for Buccaneer Gold is an all-new adventure where cutting-edge technologies involving sight, sound, and motion allow guests to fulfill their fantasy of becoming a pirate and interacting in a pirate world. enter a sound booth to become and you also at the same day enter a sound booth to become a record producer at Songmaker, where the studio comes to life as guests combine lyrics and music styles to create their own one-of-a-kind song. Guests can even download the song to a personalized CD. Look it up, kids, for their own on-air debut at home.
That right there is the entire reason Disney Quest no longer exists.
See, I was going to ask if we can do a Soundmaker Back to the Future, but
we're going to do a Disney Quest Back to the Future in July. I'll tell you that much. How about that?
Yes.
This replaced Hercules, right?
It replaced a few things, I believe, because they also removed the weird remote control trucks in the floor.
Well, those
but that's
fire.
But that floor is still there.
See, there's a difference. See, Pirates of the Caribbean goes on fire 2 months after opening and goes on to become the greatest theme park attraction of all time. Disney Quest sets on fire 2 months after opening, and it pretty much is an analogy for the rest of its existence.
Those trucks that go under the floor weren't replaced by Pirates because that floor is still there.
Yeah, that was on the opposite side of the Jungle
It was covered when
Cruise.
all this happened, though.
I think
That's
that was
what
later. I thought that was later because I remember doing those for years. I don't remember. I remember Hercules going away pretty quickly.
I love that Pirates of the Caribbean sign they built for this got recycled 6 years later and used at the real attraction. that legitimately became the marquee of the real ride. Crazy. Well, it lasted until you see the guys in that picture are like picking at it. And they ruined it. So we can't have nice things. Anyway.
Whatever.
That bald guy.
Yeah, you see them? They're ripping something. They're like ripping the wall decal off. Making us wait in line. Well, we're going to destroy it then. This is a cool attraction. I almost say was a couple months. I want to go ride this one last time. It's kind of fun.
It was definitely my favorite thing to do at Disney Quest.
It's the only thing of value.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the number of innovative things at Disney Quest, so like Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters is fun, but it's not innovative. This and Virtual Jungle Cruise were innovative things at Disney Quest, and Virtual Jungle Cruise was just annoying because it didn't work right. So this was really the only thing, you're right, the only thing of value to do. It was the most fun thing in Disney Quest. It always had a long line.
Well, yeah, the only fun in Virtual Jungle Cruise is when you fall off the back of the boat. Which I've done several times.
Not wrong.
Yeah.
I've got a lot to say about Disney Quest, but I'll wait till we do the episode.
We need to do a Back to the Future on it. Absolutely. It needs to happen. We could probably get some of the people who helped build Disney Quest. They're probably not doing much. I worked on Disney Quest Chicago.
Oh, I forgot about that.
We'll have to find the one guy that visited Disney Quest Chicago for that.
I have fun stories about Disney Quest, which some of you have heard, but
we're gonna do it. So then a couple years later, we're going to backtrack a little bit to set up the story. In the early 1990s, screenwriters Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio conceived a supernatural spin on the pirate genre after completing work on Aladdin, but there was no interest from any studio. Undeterred, the writing team refused to give up the dream, waiting for a studio to pick up their take on a pirate tale. Disney had Jay Walpert write a script based on Pirates of the Caribbean, which producer Jerry Bruckheimer rejected, feeling it was a straight pirate movie. Bruckheimer brought Stuart Beattie in to rewrite the script in March 2002 due to his knowledge of piracy, and later that month, Elliott and Rossio were brought in. Elliott and Rossio, inspired by the opening narration of the ride, decided to give the film a supernatural edge. As the budget rose, Michael Eisner and Robert Iger threatened to cancel the film, though Bruckheimer changed their minds when he showed them concept art and animatics for the film in progress. In June 2002, Gore Verbinski signed on to direct Curse of the Black Pearl, and Johnny Depp and Jeffrey Rush signed on the following month to star. By the way, Jeffrey Rush is pretty unknown at this point. Johnny Depp isn't even super famous. Johnny Depp is known by a lot of people mostly as Edward Scissorhands at this point, and then is known for a lot of, I would say, cult classic roles beyond that.
He was kind of a has-been at the time, not like hugely a has-been. He was still like as you said, cult. And Rush was known for, I think, like independent film.
Rush was a very artistic actor, picked a lot of indie and roles of that sort, which he still has even since Pirates. He has not done a tremendous amount of big budget movies, although I think he was in Love Actually, which is a terrible film that no one should see ever.
He was in Quills.
What is Quills?
Which is a weird movie.
It's a movie about the Marquis de Sade.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If I have my timing right, I think he won his Oscar after he filmed Pirates, but before Pirates was released.
I believe you're correct.
Yeah.
Right? I believe it was between the two. Yeah.
Right.
Verbinski was attracted to the idea of using modern technology to resurrect a genre, one that had disappeared after the golden age of Hollywood, a golden age that inspired Pirates of the Caribbean: The Ride, and recalled his childhood memories of the attraction, feeling the film was an opportunity to pay tribute to the scary and funny tone. Depp was attracted to the story as he found it quirky. Rather than trying to find treasure, the crew of the Black Pearl were trying to return it in order to lift their curse. Also, the traditional mutiny had already taken place. Verbinski approached Rush for the role of Barbossa as he knew he would not play it with attempts at complexity, but with a simple villainy that would suit the story's tone. Orlando Bloom read the script after Rush, with whom he was working on. Ned Kelly suggested it to him. Keira Knightley came as a surprise to Verbinski. He had not seen her performance in Bend It Like Beckham and was impressed by her audition. Tom Wilkinson was negotiated to play Governor Swan, but the role went to Jonathan Pryce, whom Depp idolized. Shooting for The Curse of the Black Pearl began on October 9, 2002, was wrapped by March 7, 2003. Before its release, many executives and journalists expected the film to flop, as the pirate genre had not been successful for many years. Also, there were those stories of it going way over budget and other production problems. Also, the film was based on a theme park ride, and Depp rarely made a big film. Number one, the theme park ride that was the predecessor to this one was a little film called The Country Bears. It's a piece of garbage.
To put it mildly.
To put it mildly, it is a piece of garbage. They expected, to give you an idea, and it's quoted in some interviews, they said, "We think The Haunted Mansion is going to be our big hit film of this year, and Pirates of the Caribbean not so much. Eddie Murphy's Haunted Mansion is going to be huge. Pirates is just, it's going to come out." The opposite happened. The Haunted Mansion was a commercial disaster.
I like that film.
Panned horribly.
It's all right.
Did you actually just say you like that film?
I think he just did.
I did. I like that.
It might be too late. That might be what's
I
happening.
used to respect you.
That movie, The Country Bears, doesn't make me nearly as angry.
Really?
Maybe it's because there's some amazing lines from what's his name in it?
Bears.
Bears! I'll get you! Bears! Country Bears. Anyway. Also, Big Al's amazing in that movie. As terrible as it is. Yeah, they thought Mansion was going to be a big hit. It's not good. And Curse of the Black Pearl was a surprise hit. So in 2004, they greenlit two sequels. Dead Man's Chest, which would come out in 2006, and At World's End in 2007. And then a couple years later, they made a bad one called On Stranger Tides. And then there is going to be a fifth film in the series being released in 2 months, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales.
Or Johnny Depp needs money from his divorce.
Johnny Depp almost was a dead man. This is the name of this one. So there you go. Pirates of the Caribbean comes out. It's the only one of these attraction films that succeeds. And, you know, a lot of people say to me sometimes, well, that's because it has nothing to do with the ride. You are brutally mistaken. It is almost like there are scenes from the ride in it. Absolutely. The whole backstory is ripped from the attraction. And going back and rewatching it later, you notice more and more attraction stuff. Every time you watch that first movie, it's amazing what a good job they did of telling an amazing original story, but putting in almost everything from the attraction. It's unbelievable.
But I think the difference between that and, say, the Haunted Mansion movie is in Pirates, it's very subtle. Like, they're not in in Haunted Mansion, it's like, hey, did you get it? That was a reference to the ride. Whereas Pirates, they just do it, and it works within the story.
Yeah.
And if you recognize it as part of the ride and the attraction, it's really cool. But it doesn't detract if you, say, haven't been on the ride or, you know, ridden it hundreds of times like we have and may not recognize it right off. I think that's the difference. That's why it works.
It's just a
Mansion
good movie.
doesn't. Well, that helps too.
It's a good movie. Like it doesn't matter what you're referencing. It's the same way what they figured out with when superhero movies became good. They figured out how to make enjoyable movies, and then it was secondary that they were about all these things that happened in the comic books. It was a good movie first and a good comic book movie second. And I think that's what made them good. That's the secret of Marvel's success. I think that was the secret of the success of this first Pirates movie was it was a great movie first, and then it was a great retelling of a lot of aspects of the attraction.
I mean, in some ways, Pirates really set the model for the Marvel movies, right? In taking an existing property that has...
It's got that same wit and everything.
Yeah, exactly. It's got that same tone and that same lightheartedness that belies a deeper, more, I'll call it violent plot, but it still has that type of attitude that's been really successful for Marvel and been completely ignored by DC.
I agree. I think David and Ashley really sort of hit on something when they talk about that's sort of what brings the success or the subtleties, but also that it can be sort of self-deprecating. It knows when to poke fun at itself, but also knows how to sort of treat the attraction with some reverence as well. And I think that there's a balance that it strikes, and you really start to see that, as Tom said, in the Marvel films as well.
I really had to be convinced to go see Pirates because Mansion was so bad.
Mansion came out after Pirates.
I thought it was first.
Mansion was Pirates
it?
Was summer, Mansion was fall.
I thought I was still in school when Mansion came
out.
No,
definitely Pirates came
spring.
first by like 3 or 4 months.
Huh.
If not more.
I don't know, because I'm just thinking of where I saw those theaters and where I was living at the time.
Pirates still playing, maybe?
That could very well be.
Did you go to like a dollar theater?
Opening day for the Haunted Mansion was November 26, 2003.
Oh, okay. So that's I thought it was 2002.
Spring or summer, yeah.
I know. I went to see it at the Lowe's at Universal, and I was kind of the only person in the theater in the matinee. But yeah, I was blown away by how good it was.
Was that a Lowe's?
It was a Lowe's originally, yeah.
No, it's AMC now, right?
Well, AMC bought Lowe's altogether.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I remember definitely seeing it there and being really surprised and kind of surprised how empty it was because people have been coming up to me for a while saying, "Oh, how have you not seen this? You go to every movie and you work there." So
I remember going to opening night to Pirates. We didn't go see Bears in theaters because it looked like garbage. And I finally saw it on DVD, and I remember like, oh yeah, that's garbage. But Pirates, because it was Pirates, I felt like I've got to go see this. And Mansion was the same thing. We went opening night to Mansion too. But Pirates, I remember getting up at the end, and I look at my cousin, and I go, "Was it really that good?" And he goes, "Yeah, I think it was that good." And it was just like this stunt. We were stunned. Like no one thought this is going to be good. This is going to be a piece of garbage. And instead, it became one of my favorite movies I've ever seen. I would easily put this forever in my top 3. I love this movie so much. The sequel, and I like this. I know a lot of people don't care for the sequels. I like 2 and 3 a lot.
Well, for me, I was already a Johnny Depp fan, and like I kind of rolled my eyes at them making a movie based on the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction. But I went to see it mostly actually because of Johnny Depp, and that's why I gave it the benefit of the doubt. And
why did you like Johnny Depp?
I enjoyed his films up to that point.
Like which one?
Which ones?
All the ones you've never heard of, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, what was already out by that point?
Yeah, I don't even know. That's why I'm asking. I'm curious.
Gilbert Grape, yeah.
21 Jump Street.
Well, that I liked more because of Leo. But anyway,
he was in movies like Blow,
Blow, yeah, that came out
That was
before
a
that
good
one.
one.
That
Blow
was
is
great.
also an adequate
Love
review
Blow.
of many of his movies.
Sure, but he also he did a lot of the Sleepy Hollow type movies, but then he also did some.
Sleepy Hollow.
He also did.
I like that movie.
Oh,
So
Jack
good.
Hollow.
I really like that movie.
He also did some good. He also was in some good movies that were more of indie or cult classics.
Yeah.
But I mean, he wasn't at a point where he was the superstar Johnny Depp.
I only knew him as Edward Scissorhands. It's the only thing I knew.
But this is the thing, like he took this role of Jack Sparrow and just made it something very, very special.
Oh,
so
yeah, absolutely.
as poor as maybe some of the sequels are, they're still good.
You want to
because
see
of
that
him.
character
he's,
back.
Yeah.
You want to see him.
He captures your attention.
Yeah,
and,
like I know
he's
it's going to be
iconic.
bad, but I don't care because I
Right.
want to see Jack Sparrow again.
I mean, he's iconic, and I mean, it's
Even in the
you know
Terrible
what it is.
Studios attraction, he does some great work.
Yeah.
But as good as Johnny Depp is in each of the films, Jeffrey Rush is equally as good. And I think that there's a chemistry there that you just can't fabricate. And they might have just sort of stepped into something wonderful, but I think that you can't discount the fact that those two actors have made something really special with the movies. And if you have a different actor in either role, you might not have something nearly as good, something nearly as special.
I don't hate Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley.
I was gonna
either.
say they're not bad, and even
Yeah.
I would say their scenes with and maybe it's just because Depp himself is a better actor, but their scenes one-on-one with Johnny Depp are better than their scenes together.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is I think the
Together.
fourth film showed that, if you put another couple involved in this thing, it's going to be terrible, and it made people suddenly go, oh, I guess I did like the two of them in these movies.
Yeah, I missed them. Although they did. How can you bring them back when you kind of wreck their
Find out in May.
Yeah. Are they both coming back?
Who knows?
The big difference between the first one and the sequels, I think, was they went with such complex plots for the sequel. The first one is just a series of rescue after rescue after rescue. Everybody gets captured, recaptured.
It has several false finishes. Yeah.
There's no real they have one MacGuffin to get, and it's not this whole complicated story of you need this to get this to get this to get this.
I love Davy Jones though. Get out of here.
But it felt like they became Monkey Island, where you needed this item to get this item to get this item. It was a video game.
No, that's the business of movie making, but damn, dude, I want more Davy Jones. Davy Jones is the best. Such a good villain.
And then when you got to 2 and 3, I don't like 2. I think 2 is the worst beyond 4. I
don't
enjoy 4
think
more.
so.
And 2, I walked out going, I want more Jack Sparrow. There wasn't enough Sparrow in this. And then you get to the third one, and then you have him talking to himself for an hour where they corrected and give you too much Sparrow.
I still like that movie, but that.
Yeah, it's not a great scene. I got to point out that in my mind, especially the first one, was one of the great film scores put together, and that was
You're
one
hearing it in the background right now.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the last minute changes for that film, and I think it adds 20-25% to the quality of that film.
And it comes in an era where these sort of themes were dead and buried.
Right.
Like you think about. Like the last era of themes like that was the 80s. You think about Star Wars and Indiana Jones and think about all Back to the Future, and even Ghostbusters isn't a big orchestral piece, but still it has a big theme. And 90s that kind of goes away for generic action themes. And
I was going to say
Pirates.
Jurassic Park is kind of the last one that you think about in the 90s.
Yeah. But then that goes away for like 10 years, and then that pirate theme, and I'm glad you bring it up because in theme park use, that theme has become everything. We'll talk about a couple of things that use it later, but I think about World of Color, that scene in World of Color with the fire and the theme, it's amazing. I love that. Yeah. But we're going long, so let's keep our story going. Let's move forward to the film Inspiring Changes in the Attraction, 2006. As the sequels to the first film were being developed, rumors swirled that Jack Sparrow and other characters in the film would be added to the classic attraction. The attraction closed on March 1st, 2006 at Walt Disney World, but then reopened for 3 weeks in April before closing again to complete the work. because we needed it for spring break. The attraction officially reopened to guests at Disneyland on June 26th because they didn't have to reopen. Meanwhile, it reopened in Florida on July 7th, the opening day of Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest. Captain Jack Sparrow appears in the attraction on 3 different occasions. His first appearance occurs during the familiar dunking scene where he's hiding behind some mannequins of women. He then appears in the barrel next to the salty old pirate who's reviewing a treasure map. A good way to fix that scene, might I add. That was a nice change.
Absolutely.
And lastly, Jack Sparrow can be spotted in the finale of the attraction, relishing in his good fortune to be the first to find the town's treasure. Another good fix, considering he replaced the 2 pirates carrying the treasure chest at Disneyland, which was stupid. Anyway. Also, our end scene in Florida was never really memorable. As much as I did like it, I don't feel like it sticks with me after all these years. I don't really care that it's gone. I much more care about Barbossa being there than I care about that finale scene being changed. Additionally, the treacherous Barbossa can now be seen as the captain of the Wicked Wench. It was originally going to be turned into the Black Pearl, but they actually didn't approve it. Bruckheimer said no, they didn't allow it because they didn't want the Wicked Wench to be changed. Also, an apparition of the ghostly Davy Jones, a prominent character in the new film, could be seen at the attraction's mysterious grotto labyrinth, materializing via a fantastic waterfall effect when it works.
So when you say it was going to be the Black Pearl, you mean just the name?
They were going to remodel the boat.
Oh, remodel it. Okay.
Bruckheimer said no because
I'm
he
glad
thought it was
they
changing
changed
too much
that.
of the ride.
Wow.
Bruckheimer was worried about changing too much of the ride.
Yeah.
Jerry Bruckheimer
weird.
specifically is the one that said no.
Like the Imagineering wanted to do it, and Bruckheimer said no.
Management wanted to do it, and Bruckheimer said
Oh man. Yeah.
they
Either way,
were
no,
really,
good for them.
really picky about what changes were allowed. Like extraordinarily picky.
Bruckheimer was or management was?
Bruckheimer. Management, I think, wanted to go much heavier.
And Bruckheimer
there
just didn't
was
want...
the original plans for this redo, as rumor goes, were going to make the attraction much, much scarier. Eventually, Bruckheimer shot down a bunch of stuff, and they landed on these several small changes. Pirates of the Caribbean was supposed to be changed a lot more than it actually was.
So Bruckheimer didn't want to dilute the movie franchise by making the ride too much.
He said
like
he
the
didn't want to
movies?
dilute the ride. He didn't want his movie franchise to be taken down by the fact that they destroyed the original attraction.
He didn't want people to be pissed off at him.
That makes sense.
You don't want to hurt the
Because it was
franchise
his
in any
movie.
way. If you hurt the ride,
You
That
hurt
hurts
the
the
hurting the
franchise.
franchise. That was his
Right.
viewpoint.
It makes
that was-
sense.
It makes sense. That's very, very surprising, but it makes sense.
Bruckheimer's
Yeah.
a great businessman. I mean,
He gets a lot of bad rap for the Michael Bay films, but he's produced some amazing films.
Michael
over the
Bay is a cancer. Jerry Bruckheimer knows what he's doing.
years. I mean,
He's
back
the
to
anti-Michael Bay. Yeah, he makes big action films, but he also kind of understands what he's doing. Anyway. In addition to weaving the characters of Jack Sparrow, Barbossa, and Davy Jones into the storyline, the Imagineers enhanced the attraction experience with an all-new dynamic digital sound design. The addition of musical cues from the movie soundtracks enhanced theatrical lighting designs and improved battle sequences between the pirate galleon and the Spanish fortress were added. That's when they added the giant blasts of air that sometimes hit you in the head, which are really, really neat. Still
Yes.
One of the largest scenes to be enhanced is the impressive treasure room found at Disneyland. Imagineers removed the scene entirely and fabricated more than 400,000 new shimmering gold coins and set pieces. The scene at Disneyland contains an original movie prop from the film, including the treasure chest with the cursed gold. In Florida, the attraction received a larger marquee, removing the original signage and Peg Leg Pete. How dare you? Anyway, the exterior music loop was also changed to music from the film, which still plays now, which works really well, except for when you get that music from the scene where they fly back and forth with the cages, because it sounds really stupid in that area. Because it's like trapeze music, and it just sounds dumb. But otherwise, it's great. Inside in Walt Disney World, the talking pirate skull before the drop was also removed. And now you go down the drop in complete darkness and silence. These changes were great. I thought they didn't ruin the ride. I probably would have liked them leaving the other guy as the captain of the ship, but otherwise, I think they're good. I
was very concerned.
I think everybody, because it was still we were still coming out of a really bad, couple of years, so everyone was super worried.
I was very worried, but yeah, it turns out that these changes were in no way as angering to me as the ones in '96 with the politically correctness.
Yeah, and the film was such a hit. How do you not do it? Like, I mean, it made sense, and they did it in a tasteful way. I thought
they did a very good job.
Yes, understated.
Thank God for
that was the key.
And
I was gonna say, they didn't go way overboard.
Overboard.
And Tom, I know you're saying you don't like that you don't like Barbossa taking over the ship, so to speak. But I think if they didn't put Jeffrey Rush somewhere in the ride, I think we may have been more angry. I
agree.
Maybe not there. Maybe they're somewhere else. But
I get it.
I think he deserves to be there.
Yeah. So this also marked a pretty interesting change at the parks. This started a couple of years, which you might refer to as Pirate Palooza. There's a lot of pirate stuff going on, and there were pirate things already there. The Mickey's Booty You Halloween Parade had Pirates of the Caribbean, and remember when it had the redhead? It was a good time. And then they added movie characters and stuff. One of the bigger things was Mickey's Pirate and Princess Party. Mickey's Pirate and Princess Party was a hard-ticketed event held throughout the months of January through June at the Magic Kingdom of Walt Disney World. The event combined two of the company's biggest franchises, the Disney Princesses and the Pirates of the Caribbean. So anyway, each of the lands within the Magic Kingdom was centered to a theme related to royalty or piracy. In Adventureland, they had Princess Jasmine and generic pirates. In Liberty Square, there was Pirates of the Caribbean. Fantasyland had an Ariel theme. Tomorrowland had a Space Pirates theme, which somehow didn't connect to Treasure Planet. And Mickey's Toontown Fair had a bunch of other princesses, such as Mulan and Snow White. Entertainment offerings include the Enchanted Adventures Parade, with many floats that ended up getting recycled into Booty You. Magic, Music, and Mayhem, which I still stand by as the best fireworks show I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. Spectacular show eventually became the Summer Nightastic Fireworks Spectacular, but has been retired since. Also had a nighttime version of Dream Along with Mickey. Yeah, way to sell tickets, guys. And there were dance parties in Fantasyland and Tomorrowland. These were great. I love these. They were not super busy, which is why they don't have them.
Yeah, exactly.
But they were wonderful. I thought these were fantastic.
So two things I remember about this: the fireworks, spectacular, amazing. The other thing is I was always very upset because the park would obviously close early for the hard-ticketed event, and this was another large chunk of the year. So you had Christmas, you had
because from September to December, you almost can't go to the Magic Kingdom at night,
right? And now you had another chunk of the year that was kind of taken away, the Magic Kingdom at night. I remember always being very annoyed at that.
I love the fireworks show so much. There was one trip we were here, there were two of them. We went to the first party, we had a great time. We bought tickets to the second party, we left after the fireworks. That's how good that fireworks show. We literally came just to see that fireworks show again. Exactly.
Yeah, that is one of the and I even thought the parade was half decent.
Parade was fine. The soundtrack sucked. The soundtrack was terrible.
Yeah.
But the parade was good.
I mean, the fireworks show was definitely worth the price of admission, but the parade was
had new floats. They built the giant pirate ship for Enchanted Adventures. It was a big deal.
Did they reuse that pirate ship?
It's in Booty You.
Oh, yeah. So they added it to Booty You. Okay.
Yeah, the TikTok Croc, which is in Festival of Fantasy now, was built for that too.
Okay.
Yeah. And it, of course, had the castle float. Because what parade at that point did?
Gotta have it.
Lights are flickering.
We're on our fourth trip through this music loop too.
Yeah, are we? No, this is already the longest Back to the Future ever. Let's keep going. Meanwhile, at Disneyland, Tom Sawyer Island opened in 1956, 1 year after the opening of the park. But the island was made to receive major upgrades, new show elements, and a complete retheming in 2007 when it reopened as Pirates Lair on Tom Sawyer Island. The retheming eradicated much of the previous Tom Sawyer theme in favor of characters and elements from and inspired by the Pirates of the Caribbean film series. There's the map. Pirates Lair. Really pixelated. Pirates Lair on Tom Sawyer Island opening coincided with the theatrical release of Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. Nice little update, and the lawyers at Disneyland had destroyed Tom Sawyer Island enough at this point where this probably needed to happen anyway.
Something needed to happen. Yeah, Tom Sawyer Island was just no fun anymore.
Yeah, like Florida.
The effects they added are actually great.
Well, there's the animatronic head that pops up when you try to grab the gold. That's fantastic.
I honestly still think Paris has the best area of these.
Yeah. We don't have to take a boat either, which is one.
Right, it's connected to the treehouse. It winds through. It's just a little great distraction that you don't have to, wait to get to. You just kind of go on. The boat's there. There's some really cool caves that are multi-level. Of course, like everything in Paris, it was falling apart when I was there, and you could see like the rebar kind of sticking out of some of the rock work.
Oh, jeez.
It sounds like Paris.
Let me see if I can find that picture and share that one.
Well, while you're finding that beautiful picture of rebar, yes, that's Tom Sawyer Island. Meanwhile, back in Florida, we had more pirate stuff to do. The Pirates League. On June 29, 2009, even though the films were done, the Pirates League opened near the entrance of the attraction, offering swashbuckling makeovers. Participants received pirate names before receiving a variety of accessories, including beards, eye patches, scarves, scars, earrings, and gold teeth. You also could be transformed, apparently, into someone from OBT. What it sounded like. These are applied by a veteran pirate, quote-unquote, with sea-sailing tales. After taking a sacred oath and an official portrait, guests will be part of Jack Sparrow's gang. And there are 3 pirate packages available. This was the male answer to Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique, which was already proving popular. It's really well themed. It's gorgeous in there. If you ever
it is. They put a lot of work into it.
Yeah.
What was there before, Tom? I can't even recall.
That I believe was the portrait studio.
Okay.
And then it became backstage storage space for many years. I'm pretty sure that's where I went to take my pictures, though.
I think that's where that was. I have it. It's not quite rebar sticking out, but you could see where some of the metal underwork was like actually showing on one of the columns. Yeah. It was just so worn away from people.
It's a piece of metal.
Because it's some place where you would walk around that corner, so people would just grab it and spin it.
But you can see the paint chips on the rock behind it too. Look at that splotch.
Yep.
Yeah.
What is this? Universal?
No, it's Paris, but close.
Yeah, right. All right, let's keep going. Oh, we're on to our 5th loop of the background loop. Anyway. 2011 set those time coordinates to coincide with the release of Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tales, a projection of Captain Blackbeard, otherwise known as Mumblebeard, voiced by Ian McShane, temporarily replaced the 2006 projection of Davy Jones in the Disneyland and Magic Kingdom versions. Since then, there has been several changes. Disneyland bounced to just Davy Jones again, then it was both of them for a while, then it's just Davy Jones again, now they're both back. Walt Disney World, we held out for a long time before finally switching between the two of them, which is what it does now. Walt Disney World also introduced changes to the grotto scene in 2012, and a year and a half after the film for some reason. A skeletal mermaid was added to the beach, the Jolly Sailor Bold song from the film added, and a projection of the mermaids with splashing fin effects added in the water prior to the beach. For unknown reasons, the projections were deactivated sometimes afterwards, but the music and the skeleton remained. Surprisingly, the glass mermaid transport device from the film mysteriously showed up on the beach in 2016, 4 years later, but is still yet to be remarked on by Disney. This is just all very strange. The mermaid scene I thought was fantastic. I loved the projection and the fin would splash water. Actually, it still does it. If you look there, you see that splash still. I thought this effect was great, and I love the dead mermaid skeleton on the beach. A lot of people said they cluttered the beach too much, but I thought it was cool. Now it's kind of stupid. The music plays and there's a splash, but you don't really see anything.
I wonder why they deactivated the projections. That doesn't sound like it would be
Some people said it just because they didn't think it looked good enough. I don't understand this.
I liked it.
Well,
I really
if
liked
that's
it.
Weird,
I thought
yeah,
it was
I thought it
good
looked
too.
great.
And if it didn't look good, well, what looks worse is the splashing without the mermaid.
But you have to look for it. Like,
Yeah, I
I'm
guess.
looking for it. Like, other guests aren't going to notice that a little
But there's
splash.
still a musical cue then, and nothing like you're.
There is,
expecting
but there's
something
the
to
skeleton
happen.
on the beach, I guess, so it still kind of connects.
The biggest mystery is the box. It just showed up one day for no apparent reason.
They found it in an old
something
prop.
There-
They're like, what do we do with it? Go put it
So
on the beach.
here's supposedly what's happening. Supposedly, number one, there is a large-scale Pirates refurb for Florida coming with new scenes and things from the secondly, the refurb in Paris, which is going on now, supposedly is adding a mermaid effect, which is better than ours and will be carried over. That is the rumor. That's in no way confirmed. I haven't heard anything in a while, but that's at least what's been said.
Yeah, but that box has been there a while now, and it's just
Yeah, and I think it just was they acquired the prop and they're like, let's just put it out now instead of keeping it in storage.
And
well,
I can
Disney
tell
World
you,
doesn't have any props. Let's throw it there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they had a backlot tour they could put it on.
Actually, it was like, we got this thing and we don't have anywhere to store it. Well, let's store it in the ride.
Yeah, go put it out on the
It
beach.
belongs there.
It'll
It's
be fine.
the mermaid scene.
Let's drive a bunch of bloggers crazy by putting a prop here so that they run it over for the next.
Well, in fairness, we saw it and no one else noticed it existed. So that was all our finding. And I don't know if anyone else would have ever figured out it was there. So it had been there for 2 weeks before I got a clear picture and posted that. That tells you how up on things everybody else is.
and WDI used to do that stuff all the time. Like, we would show up and the hearse in front of the mansion was gone, and then it was back, and then it was gone. We had no idea, like nobody in ops.
Or there's
was
a photo
told.
op without heads on it at the end of Mansion, and then it's gone the next day.
The Leota tombstone was one I distinctly remember just came out of nowhere, because I think I might have been the one to discover it, because I was opening and I'm like, oh, that's new, and then it blinks at me. I go running inside like, has anybody seen this before? And nobody there had seen it, so it was the first couple of days, at least.
Overnight installation.
And they would not tell ops anything, so this could have just shown up one day and nobody had any clue.
Yeah. So those are your 2011 changes. We move forward to 2012. The Legend of Jack Sparrow. Jason, could you pull a little video up of this thing?
I will try.
Okay. The Legend of Captain Jack Sparrow was an immersive walkthrough special effects attraction at Disney's Hollywood Studios at Walt Disney World. The attraction opened on December 6, 2012, replacing Journey into Narnia Prince Caspian, or as I called it, Don't Go In That. Guests followed the story of Captain Jack Sparrow from the film series and experienced several interactive sequences. Guests were taken into an indoor theater themed to a coastal cove, where they were recruited by a talking skull, voiced by James Arnold Taylor, in hopes of becoming part of Captain Jack Sparrow's crew. During the training process, static skeletons are reanimated from the dead, Davy Jones' Kraken appears, and mermaids attempts to coax guests by singing sea chants. The talking skull informed guests that they are ready to partake in Sparrow's crew. Following his words, Jack Sparrow appears via high-definition projection and engages in a battle with Davy Jones, entrusting his newly inducted crew to help. Sparrow manages to defeat Jones by sinking his ship, the Flying Dutchman. Sparrow congratulates his crew and invites them in a celebratory singing of Yo-Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me. Finally, Sparrow bids the guests farewell, and the show concludes. By the way, as part of this, in order to kill the mermaids, you had to stomp your feet. Because as you all know, stomping your feet on the ground kills nearby mermaids. Yes.
Well, duh.
Yeah. Jason, you got it. You could fast forward a little and pull that up for everybody. There's the talking skull that greeted people at the beginning. Oh, there we go. Now we're in there. There's just a bunch of projections. The rock walls would be projection mapped, and they do some cool stuff on there. Technically marvelous. Story-wise, trash is, I think, a fair review.
I loved this. I really did. I know you
there was
guys
cool
always fan
effects,
this. Yes,
but
the interaction was awful.
yeah,
But I loved visually. It was stunning, and
Yeah.
it was technically an amazing thing to walk through and see what they were trying out.
projection mapping was still very new at the time, so it was
Yeah.
neat. And like him appearing on the boat was cool, and had
He
different
did
endings.
a great job with this.
Yeah,
and
it just was a poor execution. It was a great idea with cool technology. There's the mermaids. Everybody, step your feet. But then, like, it just story-wise, like, why is there a talking skull teaching us how to be pirates?
That's
Why
okay.
isn't Jack Sparrow just teaching us how to be pirates?
in this space, it didn't have to be anything crazy. I mean, it was replacing Narnia.
It didn't have to be
I mean,
crazy, but it had
was
to make
good.
sense.
I don't
There's
understand.
a floating skull talking to Jack Sparrow.
I don't understand how it was poorly received. I really, really don't.
Here's why it was
because
poorly received.
You go in there and you have a
People
good
walk
time.
up. There's this big mural. It says Legend of Jack Sparrow.
Yeah.
Oh my God, let's go in there. People wait a half hour or more.
Mhm.
They go in and they stand in a room and stomp on mermaids.
Okay, well, I guess if you wait a half an hour. For
That
this.
was the problem. People were waiting a
Yeah.
long time and didn't understand that they were not getting in line for a ride.
Mm.
And on top of that, it just wasn't good.
Here's what I
It had
took this.
redeeming qualities, absolutely. Technologically, absolutely.
It was a nice showcase of the technology that I think that we then got to see in other places.
See, and I took this as this was an older, kind of a throwback to an old studios type experience.
Those go over great.
Wow.
May I refer you to the American Idol experience?
Oh boy.
I loved Idol, by the way, but
we could just rattle off list of failed studio distractions, but it was in the soundstage. From my perspective, I wasn't expecting a whole lot. I think you're right. The average guest though was like, "Oh my God, there's pirates here now too," and they got this, which was cool, and I enjoyed. But for me, it was a little bit of a throwback to what studios used to be, which was a little showcase of a little piece of movie magic, so to speak, and also kind of showcasing a little bit what's coming, what's coming out from WDI, which I thought was cool. But maybe they should have been more explicatory as to what they were going to show folks.
Yeah, I think that was more of the problem. I think some writing changes. It could have been fixed. They just decided not to. They decided just to close it, which it did close on November 6, 2014, barely 2 years later. The attraction was so poorly received, it was decided best just to shutter it. The park would test better with it closed.
This really reminds me of Poseidon's Adventure at Universal.
Poseidon's Fury, you mean?
Poseidon's Fury.
Yeah.
Where you're standing there and there's all this projection and action going on around you.
There's cooler stuff in that. There's so much more.
Oh yeah. I absolutely.
And yes, I
agree
am
that-
saying Poseidon's Fury is better than The Legend of Jack Sparrow.
The original one had a good story too. They I don't know what they did with that second.
It's not terrible now, but it's definitely not as good as it was.
Only if the vortex works, but
It's actually really comical in the way this is streaming. It's almost like a stop motion film, and it looks even more ridiculous now than it did when we saw it in person. It almost looks more like the old 3D pirate film at Busch Gardens.
Oh jeez,
it's terrible. Anyway, so just a fun fact for you: the lead show writer on the project was Jason Sorrell. Jason Sorrell would go on to leave Disney after this. They say leave. Leading new projects for Universal Orlando, including the Race Through New York with Jimmy Fallon and Fast and the Furious Supercharged.
That explains a lot.
Those will also go down as great theme park additions.
He should stick with writing books.
Leave Jason Sorrell alone.
I love Jason Sorrell. I really do. He needs to clear his track record because these last three things are horrendous.
He
run for the hills, Jason, please.
You know what he was actually spectacular at, and I saw him a couple times doing this, was he would give talks on the Disney Cruise Line.
Yeah. His books are
His
phenomenal.
presentation was great.
The
Yeah.
Pirate and Mansion books are
Yes.
lovely.
Well, and that's what he would give talks on the cruise. He would
Yeah.
show you all of the artwork and talk about it from the books. It was great.
Yeah. The books are phenomenal. So much of this script tonight, if you don't own that book from the Magic Kingdom to the movies, go buy it immediately. It's a wonderful book. That and the Mansion one are so wonderful. I love reading them. I'll pick them back up every once in a while. They're really fantastic.
His destiny should be the WDI historian.
Yeah. I think he will come back someday, and I think he will end up in a role like that. I think he will be back. I think those books sell very well, and they want to do more of them. Rumors are they want to do a Marvel and a Star Wars version of those, basically.
The Country Bears from the Magic Kingdom to the movies?
Country Bears from the Magic Kingdom to the toilet.
From forgotten attraction to forgotten film.
Oh.
All right, punch in those time coordinates for 2013. With the rollout of My Magic Plus at Walt Disney World, FastPass Plus was added to Pirates of the Caribbean. The right side of the queue was heavily modified with additional walls, netting, and fences and more to accommodate the service. Guests had previously been able to pick a side to queue in. Meanwhile, the Crow's Nest shop, once a Kodak film location nearby, was converted into the home base for a new attraction, a new interactive quest called The Pirate's Adventure, Treasures of the Seven Seas.
7?
Yeah, 7! In A Pirate's Adventure, Treasures of the Seven Seas, guests use a pirate map and magic talisman, eventually magic bands or cards, to help them complete 5 different pirate raids throughout Adventureland. The goal is to help locate different treasures of the Seven Seas and fight off pirate enemies like the Royal Navy and Captain Barbossa, among others. If guests help Captain Jack Sparrow succeed in all the missions, they'll be welcomed as part of his new crew. Jason, maybe pull up a little video of this as well. I think this is hands down the most underrated and unappreciated attraction in all of Walt Disney. This is everything I thought Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom was going to offer.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I took my parents after it opened. I said, "You got to try this pirate thing." They're like, "All right." Is it like Sorcerers? They're like, "No, it's not." They're like, "Okay, fine then," because they did Sorcerers for like 2 minutes, and they were like, "This is stupid. Let's stop." And when the blow dart shot at my mother, she ran for miles. She ran away. And afterwards, she thought it was the coolest thing. We fired the cannon off, and the bell rang. And this is fantastic use of existing space, adding more themed elements that tie into the movies, but fit Adventureland so well. They're beautiful. But then also giving you this really fantastic thing to do. I love this so much. I kind of want to go back and do them again.
Yeah, it's magical to be able to interact with the environment, and I think again for kids in something like this, I mean that really is magic. I mean the fact like it must be really something to interact with the environment that way, and I do think that this is there were stepping stones here. I mean, we had Sorcerers, we had stuff like Kim Possible and Agent P. Yeah, but this is that next step, and I think this was a greater evolution towards that way. And I'm really excited and really, really hope that they incorporate stuff like this in like Star Wars Land, Pandora, and things like that. Because if we could interact with those environments in a game-like setting, with cool props too, the fact that you get the Pirates map and everything kind of go along with it. Really, really cool, and there's different adventures. This is
look at this, like
perfect.
the cannons on the roof of Pirates, which have been there since opening day. Them firing, like how awesome is that?
My favorite was still in Kim Possible, where the alien would come out of the kiosk in Japan shop.
It still does that for Agent P.
Yeah,
that's my favorite.
Yeah.
Because the other cool thing about this too is it gets other guests involved. Like, ooh, what is that? I want to try that. Where do I do that? And it's a cool thing to like. It's a little, you do, again with Agent P and stuff like that. You get that where guests are like, how'd you do that? What are you doing?
Well, and not only that, like you said, it's using existing infrastructure to give the guests something to do that's not an attraction. So it's a way to add capacity to the park without having to build new attractions. I mean, it costs some money, but it doesn't take any additional footprint, any additional land to build it. It's not a show building.
And this,
but
in a lot of ways, inspired the Harry Potter wand experience at Universal. I still think this is better. A lot of that is still screens. They do have some physical effects too. But this, I think, just does such a better job. It's a story and not just you having a wand and doing a task. This is actually like taking an adventure, and then if you complete all of them, now you're actually seeing the big ending. All of them.
And this is the extension of what was the idea of these theme parks anyway. Put guests in the actual story. And this is in a way that they couldn't do decades ago.
The other big thing about this is comparing it to the wand experience over in Universal is you don't have to buy a $70 wand or
very true. You would think that'd be a Disney thing to do.
Yeah, and it's
much more a Universal thing to do.
and for guests who go somewhat regularly, it's a really good thing to do. In the middle of the day, kill some time while lines are long. My kids love to do this. I mean, I think they'd rather do this than half the attractions in Adventureland.
I think I'd rather do this than half the attractions.
That's true. No, I mean, I'm not saying I don't enjoy it, but we had a stack of fast passes we were done. I was handing them out like candy as on our way out of the park because we just did so many of these just because the kids just really enjoyed it. So
yeah, and it's self-paced. If you want to do a couple, go to lunch, come back and finish it, you can. There's hardly ever any wait for any of the locations, so it's a great way to add capacity to Adventureland without adding necessarily crowds of people.
Yeah. The other good thing about is you don't have a bunch of kids running around with sticks poking at people.
You have that anyway. It has nothing to do with Pirates Adventure.
No, I'm saying Harry Potter.
No, I got the joke. I'm just saying there's kids. Usually kids just running around with sticks anyway. It was the joke. It's too late for jokes.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Mm-hmm. All right, our next destination, 2016 for Shanghai Disneyland. It was decided that the first ever land dedicated to the Pirates of the Caribbean would be built, including the first completely new attraction based off of the film series alone. The attraction uses a revolutionary boat ride system that's a blend between the classic attraction and the EMV system used in Dinosaur and the Indiana Jones Adventure. The land also includes a stunt show spectacular, of course, winning Thea Awards and all kinds of awards. Pirates of the Caribbean Battle of the Sunken Treasure is probably going to go down as one of the greatest feats in theme park history. It's the greatest modern Disney ride of probably the last couple of years. This and Racers probably between the two. But it's been a smash hit. It's loved in the industry. It's loved by guests. It's a capacity wonder. It has so much seating and so much cool stuff. It's a little screen heavy, but it's got lots of great animatronics, lots of amazing effects. We're not going to talk too much in depth because it's really not the original Pirates attraction. It's a whole new story. There are nods to the original attraction as well, but this is a whole pirate land only at Shanghai Disney. And they have a counter service restaurant.
You mentioned the stunt show. I'm always surprised that over the years they haven't replaced Indiana Jones with a pirate stunt show.
Yeah.
It's just the wrong park.
But that didn't stop them from putting that other atrocity in.
Someone is like in a wind tunnel.
Yeah,
Now they're out of the wind tunnel.
I tend to think that they want to hold on to an indie property attraction.
Well, I mean, the movie's coming out.
I think after Star Wars, the indie show is gone and they'll build an indie ride.
Wouldn't shock me.
Yeah.
Or else if the next indie movie is poor, they might just call it quits on the indie franchise.
Possible.
I hope not. I don't want to lose the stunt show.
It's a good show. It's been around forever.
Nobody shut up. It's too late for you to compliment the Indiana Jones stunt show and me be okay with it.
It's a good show.
It is a good show.
I know
it's probably not going to last forever, but I like it.
So that brings us to today. We approach the 50th anniversary of Pirates of the Caribbean. This is, of course, the Pointing Back to the Future where I open the floor That's some concept art of a unbuilt Pirates of the Caribbean attraction. Jason, you want to pull that back up? They envisioned one with a big drop at one point, but never came to pass. Anyway, so we look towards the future of Pirates of the Caribbean. Where do we see the attraction going? What is the future? Will we see pirate movie themed rides domestically? Is it something that can exist separately from the main attraction in the Magic Kingdoms, or is this just something that only Shanghai should have in any future parks? What does everybody think?
I mean, the Shanghai attraction is unbelievable. I don't know that we need that attraction here. I think that having an attraction like that's similar, based on different property, but using that technology would be absolutely amazing. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like we have Dinosaur and Disneyland has Indiana Jones. You know, I don't think they would build an Indiana Jones attraction here because we have one that's so similar with the ride system. But here's a ride system that they could adapt to something other than pirates and build an amazing attraction in Florida. So that's kind of what I would think. I don't know how they would even have it make sense in the park to bring Shanghai's version here. They couldn't get rid of our version, so they'd have to build a duplicate, and that wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think we're going to get that attraction over here. I think we're going to get that technology over here at some point. I think we're gonna stick with the current pirates that we have here in Disneyland. You know, they're just going to maintain them, do incremental updates to them. I don't see a major overhaul of them for quite a while, and I'm okay with that. I don't think we necessarily need any other film-based attractions brought into the area. Part of me feels like we're at a saturation point with pirate stuff in the parks, and I'm not sure we can get much more in a way that makes sense.
I thought we were at that saturation point with pirate and princess parties.
Yeah, I mean, I also said the same thing about Frozen, and I was wrong, but I don't foresee that being a big focus area with the coming properties that they're already working on.
Unless this movie does, we're talking like Star Wars numbers, then I think all bets are off. Then we might be seeing these come back. But if it does the kind of incremental numbers the last few Pirates movies have done, yeah, we're probably not going to see a direct movie tie-in ride anytime in the near future at all.
Yeah,
do you think we'll see a sixth movie?
I think it's dependent on this.
Yeah.
This
I
had
don't know, Jeff signed on for Fantastic Beasts, but I don't know how they carry on without him.
I thought that was part of the reason Bloom was supposed to be coming back, but
I don't think Bloom can carry it.
No, you can't have a Pirates movie without Jack Sparrow.
Originally, I thought in 2012, 2013, when Pirates 5 was originally supposed to be released in 2015, that was because there was going to be a Pirates 6 in 2017 or 18, and Johnny Depp then said no, Pirates 5 would be his absolute last, and that was why that was one of the reasons they decided to push it back to a release of 2017, because if you remember, it was actually supposed to be released 2 years ago.
Well, that's true.
And the trailer says it's his last adventure, not that Hollywood has never lied to us.
Doesn't it say the start of the final adventure, though?
I thought it
Isn't
says
that the actual wording?
I thought it says his last.
I don't remember.
Because I remember like hearing that and going back and listening to it. I believe this is the start of the final adventure,
Maybe
which
he just
leads
dies.
me to believe
Maybe he dies in the movie. Who knows?
It's the first part of like maybe 2 or 3
Well,
films.
that wouldn't mean anything. Barbossa died.
He died
He
before.
came back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he died before.
the whole movie revolves around ghosts, so it's kind of hard to have somebody die and not think they're going to come back.
Yeah, I mean, there is that whole
That's
scene
it.
where there's the scene where Jack Sparrow gets behind that woman and they mold that clay pot.
Because that ended so
Really?
much. Patrick
Really?
Swayze.
I know it's 1:45, but really.
I'm thinking with VR being so popular right now, I can see VR and pirates meshing well. I don't know where it would fit, what they would do, or where that experience might be.
Flying Banshee.
Studio? Oh.
I don't know. I mean, does it have to be a whole thing? I don't know if it could just be like some kind of little experience. That's
I
an
think they
adventure.
should
Disney
do a
Quest?
stunt show at studios.
Nice.
I want the stunt show at studios. I think it should happen.
Pirate link seats. No, I kind of agree with what everybody else said. Getting back to the rides, at least here, incremental upgrades. These both at least U.S. attractions, I think, have proven that they can stomach a little bit of movie updating without destroying the legacy, so to speak. I can't see any space for anything else.
Can we turn Caribbean Beach Resort into a Pirates of the Caribbean themed?
They have it.
Do gondolas fit in with pirates?
I sure do.
They already have the pirate rooms.
Yeah, they
BBC
do.
owners test well with pirates. So,
And they can make the gondolas look like those cages from the
There you go.
Yes.
I mean, DVC memberships are a form of piracy.
Oh boy.
I think the DVC salespeople, like after they sell you one, they all get in a ship and like hold up treasure and like, yeah, we got them. Anyway,
It's late.
signed by the X.
Make your mark.
Pete's tired.
No.
Anyway, anyone else? Where do they see pirates going?
Yeah.
Hasn't gone.
I don't think they're gonna. I mean, we've reached the point of no return with ours. I think. Again, a couple of little touches here and there, nods to the movie, but I don't see them completely overhauling any of the scenes, even to completely reference the movies and taking out what was already there. They'll figure out ways to incorporate anything they can from the movies going forward, but I don't think they're going to change. Now, they could add, certainly maybe over in studios, they could try again for something Pirates related, whether it is replacing My Beloved Indie Stunt Show with Pirates or something like that, but I don't think they're going to take it out completely or touch ours.
I would think that it's somewhat a given that this summer you will see at some point an overlay or some elements from the new film added into the attraction, similarly to the mermaids added after Pirates 4. But outside of that,
maybe divorce lawyers with shark fins.
Yeah.
I don't think that you're going to see radical changes, nor do I think that you should. I think David said it really well when he said that, it's not needed, and it really isn't going to. It's not going to affect positive change. So I don't think it's something that they're going to do. And if you think about it logistically, where does it go? Where does it go in the Magic Kingdom? Where does it go in Disneyland? There's just really not the space or the room for it.
Universe of Energy?
Shut up.
Wow.
I really hope. Has everyone seen in like the trailer and stuff? There's like ghost sharks.
Yeah, no,
I
see,
want-
they could
I
add
want ghost
those
sharks.
somewhere.
I want ghost sharks replacing the mermaid.
that's what the splashing's left for.
That's what it's
There
gonna
you
be.
Living
It's gonna be
season
like
over.
Jaws. They're gonna have.
Or
Like
they
a
could even
captain
circle
on the boat with a
around
shotgun.
the Wicked Wench.
Hey, we could actually put something in the living seas. That aquarium.
Oh,
Pirates Tower overlay would be
Oh,
amazing.
stop. Barbosa, otherwise known as the Collect.
Don't give it.
Can I say something controversial?
I stopped you.
go for it.
In our lifetimes, maybe not Justin because he's old, but in our
Jesus.
Not even the oldest guy here today.
I know you're not. That's why
Just because I had a Minnie Mouse mug.
I just had to pick on you because you haven't been here forever.
I appreciate that.
In our lifetimes, I think the movie elements will be removed from Pirates of the Caribbean. I think after this movie, the franchise goes away, and I think sometime in the next 20 or 30 years, the ride is reverted to its original form. Obviously, they'll always have new things, but I think at some point in time, Johnny Depp will probably still not continue to have the best reputation, and they will strip those characters from them.
I could see that.
I could see maybe leaving in those the essence of the character, but making it.
It will have
like
to
Johnny
fade
Depp
from consciousness over at least 2 decades or more.
Yeah.
Yep.
I could see that for maybe a major anniversary in the future.
Until the trend goes the opposite direction and we get animated remakes of the movies.
I thought you were going to say the trend goes in the opposite direction and they put back the woman in the barrel with the pirate holding her nightgown.
Guys, the only thing we need restored is Pigleg.
Peg-leg Pete.
Or
Pigleg
just
Pete.
get rid of Fast Pass.
Walt Disney World, look how much merchandise he can sell. He can sell more than this guy who won't give his ex-wife $7 million. He can do more. He could do better.
I want a new scene of Tom Corliss chasing Peg-leg Pete around in circles.
That's every night in my apartment. You should just come over. Anyway.
I think there's a new WDWNT original series here. Tom and Pegleg.
I just need to get like magnets and just always have him attached.
Oh, that would have been a good tag along.
Yeah.
Oh.
They missed it.
Those didn't do well.
They discontinued that line a
like
little
the
too
5th
early.
pirate movie.
This movie might. No, we're not going to get into the discussion right now.
All right, no, let's not, because this is already the longest Back to the Future we have ever done.
It's not quite.
It is. We passed 3.5 hours. It's official.
We are almost we are 5 minutes away from 4 hours.
It's the longest one of all time. So let's. I think with that being said, this was a nice way to celebrate 50 years of Pirates of the Caribbean, a complete history. Thank you. There's still a whole lot of people watching. I want to thank you for staying up incredibly late with us and sticking through this. And even and those of you even that are listening to this later, whether it's in podcast form or watching this on YouTube, thank you for sticking through this, even if you did it in a couple of sittings. This was a lot. But we hope you enjoyed it. We hope you had a good time. And we hope you enjoyed the complete history.
Plug the shirt.
Plug the shirt. Let's plug the shirt. Show me the shirt. Artist Rob Yo was nice enough to create a limited release Pirates of the Caribbean t-shirt. It's available through next Sunday, so the 24th, something like that. I don't know the date. Maybe 26, something like that. It's available for a little over a week and a half more. It's $18. Go to wdwnt.com/store to find it and click through to TeePublic to buy it. It's not in the regular TeePublic store, so don't just go searching. Go there and click it. It's a fantastic design, and it's not going to be available again after the anniversary. And Rob did a great job on it, so make sure you get it. With that being said, who's gonna do that final line before I hit it?
Whoosh.
No, hold on. I gotta set it up. Hold on.
I was just gonna say we're gonna give Eric a chance to redeem himself.
And I
get
to do the line. I'm gonna replace you, Eric, with Peg-leg Pete.
Probably a good idea.
Better to get back at you with Patrick Hackett. One of those two will replace you. Peg-leg Pete is in the email chains now, and you're not. Anyway, all right. So I'm gonna set it up, and then Eric, you can do the line. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You can take it away, McFly.
Whoosh.